You are such a source for all of us. You are the source field. Thank you. So with that, let's welcome David Wilcock. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all you do in the world.
We've decided that the dog is actually going to do the talk today. Tell us what you want to say, buddy. So that's the message right there. That's it.
And the talk today is Preparing for Ascension. So I just wish you all an amazing, incredible journey with David Wilcock.
All right. How's everybody doing? How do you feel? Awesome. I'm liking that energy a lot. Well, I'm really enthusiastic. I'm just going to clear my workspace here. So you know how I love to pace. You've seen my videos. You're like, I'm all over the place. Wow, this is going to be an ambitious one. I came up with some really amazing breakthroughs in my research when I was at Conscious Life Expo. And this literally occurred over the weekend. I'd already been lecturing on Ascension, and I was looking at some of the concepts that I was talking about, and I realized that there was some very major metaphysical relations between scientific data that I had and ancient prophecies that I had not captured before. And so what I'm going to be doing now is, in order to sort of get you ready for the deeper levels of information that are going to be conveyed here, I'm going to give you a scientific initiation. And that's one of the things I do best, is to not just have you take my word for it. Because even if, I mean, obviously everybody here has raised their hand. You're all Gaia members. You've all read my books. So this is actually great, because you guys have done the work. You're already scholars. You're already familiar with what I'm doing. So you will be able to appreciate this. Because even if you don't know what I'm already doing, you're still going to be able to understand this, because I always run it that way. I'm not assuming anything. It's not like you're barging in on a calculus class. But if you have already studied my material and watched all my shows, you're going to get even more out of this than you would otherwise, because so many dots are going to connect. So I've combined 3 different talks that I gave, and some of you may have seen all of them, but even still, it's the combination and getting it into 3 hours and doing it here and what I know now and the energy of this weekend is going to make it totally unique. So what I wanted to say is that we need to break down the conditioning that the mainstream scientific models have given us. Now, even if you have read my books and you watch the show, you may still fall into this conditioning, because it is a philosophical belief system that totally affects every aspect of how we think. And I am happy that I have actually finished this book. I only finished it the last big screaming deadline, because every time the publisher works with me, it's like a screaming deadline. It's never easy. It's just jump and run and drop everything. You know, that's how this works. So the Ascension Mysteries is, the first half of the book is a personal odyssey of what I've done to get to where I am now and how I ended up going through recovery from marijuana addiction. When I was 19 years old is when I actually got sober. And then the second half of the book, and I talk about the spiritual entities that like guided me through this. Then the second half of the book is actually the full disclosure in a box. It's like all of the best stuff that all of the different insiders have told me, all crammed together. And that includes a 500,000-year history of the Cabal. These people who are our planetary elite controllers do appear to be the long-lost descendants of a race that blew up another planet in our solar system that's now the asteroid belt. So those people blew up their planet, destroyed Mars in the process, because Mars was a captured moon of that planet, and they were both watery. They both had oceans and rivers and streams and life. And then those people migrated to the moon, or they were inside. Actually, they were already inside the moon. They migrated to the surface of the moon because the interior became unlivable due to the damage from the asteroids. And then eventually they got attacked on the surface of the moon, and they migrated to the surface of the Earth, which I think was not a good place for them to go because of the Draco. So this is really the context of this cosmic battle between good and evil that's going on. I've gone through this stuff throughout the weekend. We're not really going to get into a whole lot of the material in this book, but I just want to point out that there's a lot of ancient knowledge about ascension that's in there, and I'm going to cover some of that in this talk from ancient scriptures and stuff like the Law of One. So this little animation is just intended to illustrate for you how ridiculous science is right now. We have been hypnotized by this mass media control, this indoctrination, to think that the only way you can understand anything that's really going on in the universe is to know all this stuff. And then that stuff is impenetrable. You have to get an advanced PhD degree to even understand one subset of this mathematics, okay? And this is the mathematics of how matter is, how the energy of the universe works. What is it? How does it flow? How does it function? Where does it come from? How does it behave? So they tell you it's just like the priesthood all over again. You can't know this stuff. It's not yours to know. So what I'm saying is that we can actually look at things that are not mathematical equations and discover some very intrinsic points. The universe is alive. Now, some of this stuff, you've all seen my show on Gaia. Some of you may, I can't remember if all of these slides are in the show yet or not, so some of this might be new for you, some of it might be repeat, but it's like you don't go to a Fleetwood Mac concert to hear all original songs, right? You know you're going to get some things that you love, but you like to hear the interpretation of the music. So that's part of what we're doing here. So as most of you now know, I've proven that DNA cannot hold all the information that is necessary to make life. Here's your DNA molecule, and we can see how it actually winds up into the chromosomes. And this is the code that can be spliced and used to recreate one life form. Now, in the conventional model, it is believed that the DNA has everything to make life, and that even like if you have a freckle on your face, that's in your DNA. They think consciousness is all based on genes in the DNA. I'm going to decisively prove this is not true. So the Human Genome Project, by about the year 2000, had made these conclusions. The human body has 70 to 90,000 proteins. These are the things that make the tissues in your body, the basic building blocks. So there's like a particular protein that would be the fascia around your liver. Like there's a particular liver coating protein, as one example. There's lots of them. There's 90,000. Until the year 2000, scientists believed there must be at least one gene, one specific chunk of DNA to build each of these 70 to 90,000 proteins. It would make sense, so they thought, because it was a gene-based model. They also believed that we had another 30,000 genes to regulate cell growth and behavior, to create awareness, emotion, and intelligence. Now that's pretty silly in and of itself, because genes are not really that complex. And they're thinking that you're only going to need 30,000 genes to make intelligence? This is very, very bizarre. So what we found out that shocked everybody, it's like getting pantsed. You know that, when they pull your pants down? Only 34,000. You know there's got to be some inappropriate jokes if you're going to do a David Wilcock talk. It's going to happen. Only 34,000 genes in the human genome. So that means that there's not even enough to build 1/3 of the proteins in your body, and there's nothing left over for intelligence. So look, the scientists just got pantsed. This is the proof right here. Now, then we got this little guy with the big nasty name, Caenorhabditis elegans, which is a primitive worm that is widely studied in scientific laboratories, and its body is composed of exactly 969 cells. So that's not very many. And they did a genetic analysis of this, and I want you to start thinking, oh, please don't film, okay? Yeah. If anybody else is doing that, you will be publicly shamed. Test. Okay. Audio? Oh, boom. There we go. All right, yeah, I mean, I can't guarantee if somebody films it that they don't get struck with passion and want to put it online, which is actually bad. We don't want those, single camera angle, low audio quality videos going all over the internet. Okay, thanks. So anyway, it has a body composed of exactly 969 cells, and it has a brain. Its entire brain system is about 302 organized cells. So think about this in terms of what do you think might happen when they analyze this worm's DNA. So they know exactly how many cells are in its body. It's that tiny. The human body, by comparison, has 50. See, we're just going to keep going. Screw it. I'm not going to let this knock me down. Doesn't really smell that good. I will just say that. It doesn't smell like beer and cigarettes, though. That's good. Not like the Billy Joel song Piano Man, right? And the microphone smells like a beer. Now you're getting to experience what I experience up here. It's a little bit of mind sharing. Okay, so this gene model, the human body has 50 plus trillion cells. And how many genes do you think they found in the Caenorhabditis? 24,000. Now, the human body only has 34,000. So I just pantsed the scientists again, right? Because the bottom line is you can't go in here and say that genes are responsible for the building of the body. But that's what everybody thinks. It's another example of an advanced scientific mind control that has stripped any type of intelligence out of the equation of how life comes together. And then the other interesting thing is that the fruit fly, which is technically more complex as an organism than the little roundworm, only has 15,000 genes, which is even less. The human body only has 10,000 more genes than the simplest, humblest organism scientists have found that it's more than just a single-celled microbe. So everything we think we know is wrong. Yeah, if everybody could just turn their ringers off, that'll help to distract the AI so it doesn't keep giving us these technical malfunctions, like with my microphone. So then this is really cool too, and this is so important. I really hope you can grasp this. I know if you watched my show long ago, you might have seen this, but it's so valuable that I want to reiterate it. In 1984, Gariev and Poponin took a quartz container and put a piece of DNA inside it, and they were studying the amount of light that was going on inside that room. So what they did is they would take a laser, they zap it into the room, and if they don't put DNA in the room, if they just leave the room the way it is, they see photons appearing all over the room. They're evenly distributed. If they take the DNA molecule and they put that in the room, then the DNA acts like a miniature black hole. Now, what does a black hole's gravity do to light? It actually bends the path of light. It can gravitationally attract light. So DNA actually absorbs light. And that's been scientifically proven. Now, wait a minute. Shouldn't that imply that there is something really important about this behavior that we need to know about for human health? Doesn't that imply that the light-absorbing factor of DNA is critical to our health? All the photons in the room are absorbed into the DNA, and here's the actual photograph that shows you how this works. If you look at the top, you've got the existing empty space if there's no DNA in the room, and all those dots represent individual photons. Now, what you're seeing in the graph below is that curving line is actually where the DNA molecule is. That's the double helix. And every single dot now falls inside the DNA. The DNA has absorbed every single dot of light in the room. Nothing is left. what the heck is doing this? How is this possible? Already, we are dealing with energies and fields that cannot be explained in mainstream science. We got something new, something different, something exciting, something that changes everything. And I want you to think about the idea that your DNA is storing this light right now. In fact, we know there's approximately 10,000 photons stored in each DNA molecule. And when the DNA is killed by certain chemicals like ethylene dibromide, the photons go flying out. We also know that the equivalent amount of photons in the kind of vegetables that you're going to eat are 100,000 photons per square centimeter, unlike the skin that gives off 10,000 photons per square centimeter. So there's a lot more light in the food if you have the right kind of food. A friend of mine was saying, I wonder if it's going to be cold in the room. I said, I don't think so. We got the fans already going here. Not even 20 minutes in. So, no, we don't have to worry about AC hotel chill. This is contact in the desert. Flop sweat is a regular phenomenon at this conference. Let's see. Did I just do that? Wow. Man, it's been a long frickin' week. It's been a long week. Okay. That's the experimental setup where they did this. So what you got here is the cuvette is the container. And originally they shined the laser in through the collimator. That just focuses the beam. All the photons in there. If there's no DNA, they're all over the place. You stick DNA in, then they can count each individual photon, and they run it into the computer, and that's how they found out that DNA absorbs light. So now I want to give you a really, really interesting concept that turns everything upside down. And again, if you're a fan of my material, you read the books, you already know this. But there's only so much cool shit I can say. And this is one of them. And we really need to get this through because it's totally valuable to the ascension idea. What if the light is actually more important than the DNA? In other words, what if the DNA is just like a cool house? But then the people who live in the house are actually the ones that are running the show. The people who live in the house are your intelligence, and they're the ones that have all the blueprints on how to build your body. And it's just like, if you build it, they will come. So if you build the right house, if you have the right DNA lattice framework, then those people, to use the analogy of light, those people will always come to that house. They say, this is where we belong. But they have the information. So this is where it gets so bizarre, and we have to look at the data. So if you remember the Budakovsky things, one of my all-time favorites, this is where a hologram was made of a healthy raspberry plant. So they took a holographic picture of it, which means the hologram is going to include all of the DNA data in it. It's going to include the actual structure of the DNA in the hologram. Then what they do is they take a tumor, a cancerous growth, and they zap it with that hologram from the healthy plant. Now, tumors, if you get a tumor in your body, what is the medical establishment going to tell you they have to do? Just slice that sucker out. That's useless tissue. There's nothing you can do with it. Here's what a raspberry tumor looks like. It's nasty. Now, what they found was that when they zapped it, the callus, this little tumor, developed into a healthy raspberry plant. They actually rewrote the code of the DNA. What did this? The only answer could possibly be that the vibrational signature of the light was in the hologram. And this becomes very important when we start looking at the idea that the universe is a hologram. Modern biology obviously has no explanation for this. The Russians have done tons of different things like this, and it's all been swept under the rug. So you go from this nasty thing over here to perfectly healthy, fruiting raspberry plants. Furthermore, the Budakovsky study has vast theoretical and practical implications because what it tells us is that the entire genetic code can be enfolded into a single photon of light. Now, the photon itself is much, much larger than the smallest size particles that science has identified. That's really important. The smallest particles, as we're going to see in a minute here, are called Planck's constant, and that's 10 to the minus 34 centimeters. In comparison to that, a photon is the size of a planet. It's huge. And that's what I just said right here. The photons are much larger than Planck's constant. This means that there's lots of room for actual structure inside the photon. We just think the photon is dumb light. It's not true at all. The universe is built to be extremely information dense. Light contains information. The information contains density. And I know there's probably nothing we could do about it, but if it's possible that we could get the air conditioning turned up more, we already got like about 10 people fanning themselves. And remember, I'm like 10 feet higher than you guys up here. So whatever you're feeling, just amplify that. Oh, now they're all doing it, right? How are we doing over there? Can you get it down? Oh, it's working its magic. Okay. Thanks. See if we can do something with this. This dog is like making an aggressive move. He said, I want to be on that microphone. Why didn't you give me more of a chance? Well, you only could say one thing. That's the problem. So I call this digital biology. I say that DNA is written into the background energy of space and time itself. Einstein is one of the scientists who said that the whole universe is built of photons. Okay? The photons have information density, and a lot of information density. They are rich with information. That's really cool because you can rewrite the genetic code with it. Now, I want to talk to you about psychic vampires. I had a little soiree I went to last night, and while I was there, I was describing to people how one of the reasons why I actually avoided conferences I took like 5 years off, was because every now and then there would be somebody there who would actually follow me around and be very pushy and wouldn't actually disengage, and other people would try to talk to me and they would interrupt those new people and try to keep talking, and they do this over and over again. And I'm a really, really nice guy, or at least I used to be, before I had to learn how to deal with this. And you try to be nice and they just never stop. And they'll go on for an hour and they'll follow you around. And you try to tell them, look, I really need privacy, and they just keep going and going and going. And then every time I allowed this to happen, I would come home and I would be sick for a week, lying there in bed, dying, every single time. And I eventually became, I don't want to go to conferences because I don't want to lose 2 weeks of productivity. And then I learned, okay, I'm going to have to figure out how to prevent some of this from happening. So now I got a man with a frickin' gun. Why doesn't anybody else at the conference have a guy with a gun? Because they're not David Wilcock. Boom, that's that. Wow, I just lowered my IQ by about 30 points. This is going to blow your doors off. If you haven't seen this, how many of you know what I'm about to say? Okay, about half, maybe less. That's good. So that means you don't all know everything. I'm actually teaching you something. That's awesome. Okay. This study is so huge because it shows that the light is the paramount thing that is so important. So what we got here is a fish egg that has now gotten probably 3/4 of the way towards forming a fish. It's living off of that yolk sac, but it's already got its tail inside. And you can see the eye is quite prominent. So this is a reasonably mature fish egg. But when they first get started, eggs just have this little thing called a germ spot, and it's mostly just yolk and fluid. So what Burlakov did is he took a slide and he puts this slide between two rooms. The slide is in the middle. That's that little dotted area that you see there. So the room on the top has fish eggs in it, and the room on the bottom has fish eggs in it. And the only optical way that photons can pass between them is with... Oh, I just did a mouth smack. I was trying to never do that, and I just did one. That's when I try to never say or like or well or you know or the thing is that. And I try to not do mouth smacks, and I just did one. I'm so anal retentive about this stuff. Well, the thing is that on the bottom, let's say we have eggs that are young. There's just a germ spot there. We don't have any of a more developed embryo. And then let's say that the eggs on the top are actually reasonably far along, like I just showed you in the photograph. Here's where it gets really, really strange. If you put a piece of permeable material that allows ultraviolet light to go through in between the two rooms so that the photons from one side can zoom over to the other side, because photons are always happening, then what happens is that the stronger eggs actually absorb the life force out of the weaker eggs, and the weaker eggs literally die. They weaken, they wither, and they die. They don't all die, but they shrivel up. It's as if there is a stronger magnetic force coming out of the eggs on the top than the eggs on the bottom, and that's why fish will naturally lay their eggs separate from each other. Nature is doing this automatically. The other weird thing is that if you put a slide in the middle that is not permeable to ultraviolet light, that blocks the photons, then the cells do not weaken and die. They're totally fine. They grow just as well as they always would. So when you double-click on this, the implication is, okay, we're doing this to each other. We can absorb this light that is stored in our DNA. If you could actually measure how many photons each DNA molecule in your body is holding on to, if you could count if there's 10,000, and you get a whole like diagram of this, then we know that as you are attacked by someone, what's one of the things that happens to your posture when somebody starts yelling at you and trying to shame you? What happens to your posture? What do? Right? This is actually like the squeezing of the DNA. It's the milking of your energy. This is your vitality. There's people who feed on this stuff, such as the Draco. This is the source of the loosh. That's the scientific proof that there are beings out there living on negative energy. Because when you feel negative energy, your body releases a surge for its own protection. And one of the other pieces of research that I've had in a lot of my talks is that there's a natural survival mechanism we have where we send our photons to the alpha male at the front of the cave who's defending the tribe. So if you are the hero, if you can get that adulation and that respect from people, oh yeah, soaking it up, baby. Then what happens is, sure enough, that alpha male will actually be strengthened. He'll actually do better in battle. He'll fight better. This is why sports teams do better at the home stadium. Because the team is sending them love, and that love actually pumps them up. And this gets right back into the energetic dynamics of a healthy, sacred relationship in which each person is feeding the other energy, and there's a circuit that is formed. So in the ideal, healthy relationship, energy is not lost, it is being replenished. We also know that there's healing research that's been done that proves scientifically that people can heal each other's DNA, even across the coast from California to New York. There have been DNA healing studies. One of my ex-girlfriends actually was involved in one of these studies of psychic healing. And she had a photograph of a woman who had a really nasty stage 4 brain cancer, and her job was to try to heal this woman's brain cancer. We never got the results of what happened because it's a double-blind study, but she was participating in that. And 64% of these type of healing studies showed a positive result. So then when you look at the controlled mainstream media, they'll point out one of the 36% of the studies that didn't work. And they'll say, oh, it's been scientifically proven healing doesn't work. So what's really happening is that we can create portals with our mind. Every time we think about a person, we are sending, there is a portal that is created to that person through what you could call this source field. The portal is created when we focus on somebody and we start sending our lights, our little lights of photons through that pipeline to that person. So this is why, for example, it's been scientifically proven the sense of being stared at is real. They've actually had people in the laboratory sit there and think they're supposed to take a test, and then they'll have someone look at them on a closed-circuit television. The closed-circuit television image is only done by a hidden camera. The person in the room doesn't know that they're on camera. But what happens is the person who is in the room where they see the closed-circuit TV picture of this person is told at random that normally they're just supposed to be looking down and blanking out their mind. And then at certain points, they look at the person on the camera image and they stare intensely at them. And what they found very consistently was that while those people are being stared at, all kinds of physiological measurable responses in their body show excitation, fight or flight reflex, which consciously we don't necessarily understand. We have lost touch with our animal instincts, so we don't necessarily perceive that something is going to happen or that something is happening. But, right, you feel that. And then you look, and sure enough, somebody's looking at you. Okay, that's been scientifically proven because as they look at you, they create this tube of energy, and then photons start going through the tube. So if they send healing energy to you, they could actually send healing photons. So when I was at these conferences, and I've, learned how to avoid this, and I do it very politely. I've really had to learn the polish over 20 years. So that stuff doesn't happen anymore. But what was happening is this person will actually find some kind of, we do have energy fields, so you'll have a wound, you'll have some kind of energetic rip in your energy field, and then they will actually create a tube that goes into that hole and starts to withdraw photons out of your energy field. And they're actually draining you of your health and vitality. But there's the opposite side, and this very chipper-looking man is Dr. Glenn Ryan. Now, if there was anyone on earth who I believe is the reincarnation of Albert Einstein, it's Glenn Ryan. Look at the face and tell me you don't see it. This is the same guy. Albert Einstein was a breakthrough scientist, but his work was co-opted negatively and turned into a nuclear bomb that could destroy the whole planet. So he wanted to come back. In my estimation, that soul wanted to come back and do something that could only possibly be used for good, and that's exactly what occurred. His breakthrough discovery shows that love heals tissue, and he has absolute proof that it does. Here's how he proved it. You take undifferentiated cells from a human placenta, which means just they're not something anybody wants. They normally just get discarded. Then you put those cells in a tube and you hand it to people who can create certain strong emotional states. What they found was that when people got angry, the DNA inside the tube was killed. Now think about that. That's someone else's DNA that got killed. But when people feel love, the DNA actually rewound and healed molecules that were already dead. And this is measured by how much light they can absorb, because DNA absorbs light. So the particular wavelength he was using was 260 nanometers, and the amount of light at 260 that is absorbed by the DNA shows whether it's alive or dead. So when it's alive, it absorbs a lot of 260, and when it's dead, the 260 doesn't make it. So this is really amazing, because now we have absolute proof that your consciousness is taking disassembled DNA that's all spread out, and it's actually rearranging the pieces and putting it back together, like Lazarus, like this idea of raising from the dead, ascension. The functions that we need to understand that create light body, they're already here. The light is the real key. The light is the soul. The photons are part of who you really are. They have your signature on them, and they're hanging out in your body. But because, think about it, every single part of your body is filled with cells, and those cells have DNA. That means your entire body has a ghostly light form that is also going to be there. So this is direct DNA evidence supporting Burlakov's fish study. It demonstrates that vital energy can be transferred between human beings, and of course the idea that angry and aggressive people can absorb other people's vital energy. So someone else's DNA withers in your anger's presence. So you really got to think about that you are actually killing cells in someone's body if you try to attack them and act aggressively and be confrontational, and you want them to become sad, and you want them to be scared, you want them to feel ashamed of themselves. You're actually bankrupting their health. You're sucking energy out of them. This dog is just doing whatever it wants, walking around like he owns the place. All right. So this may be a genetic holdover. I already said this, so we'll just go through it quickly. The survival of the fittest, in which the more aggressive species succeeds by absorbing energy from the weak. Alpha male is drawing vital energy. We talked about that. And teams more likely to win at home games. We talked about that. Now, is all stress bad? Is all this negative stuff that happens to us and these things that kind of weaken our DNA and break apart our cells, is that all bad? No. It creates ascension. Stress is the universe's way to create massive spring-loaded spiritual growth out of nowhere. So don't necessarily feel bad if you're going through something that's really difficult. It may be your ascension booster rocket. And there's genetic evidence for that. So part of preparing for ascension is understanding that stress is not the enemy. You want to work through it. You don't want to stay in stress. But the stress creates conditions that actually create liftoff for the ascension. So let's go back to this disgusting worm. And believe me, I'm going to show you some pictures of it. And even this little guy is probably not going to want to run around the room anymore once he sees it. Avert your eyes. Okay, so the Caenorhabditis is normally a lactose-intolerant microorganism. So it can't eat milk sugar. That's basically what that means. So then, what do these lovely scientists do? They drop these lactose-intolerant organisms into a lactose-only environment. And of course, most of them die, right? Because they have nothing to eat and they can't eat lactose. So before they die, you think they're going through stress? Absolutely. They're starving. They're hungry. They can't make it. But here's where science tells us something really strange happens, because a small percentage of them actually live through it. Now, wait a minute. The lactose can't fit in their mouth. Their mouth isn't shaped right to eat lactose. So how the hell did they survive? They physically can't get it into their mouth. Their body is not wired. It's not made to digest the stuff. What they actually found when they looked down at the minute level is that these species suddenly evolved, and that the actual shape of their mouth parts suddenly changed to be able to eat the lactose. Okay, now, David, fuck you, David. You're trying to think about this, connect the dots. I'll help you. 969 cells in the Caenorhabditis, right? 24,000 genes. How many genes do we have? 34,000. So how much genetically different are we from the Caenorhabditis? Only 10,000 genes apart. So if they can do this to themselves, then what happens to the human being? Why couldn't we do something like this? Well, clearly, because the worm is so much smaller, because it only has 969 cells, it's actually possible to do a more rapid, sudden genetic rewrite. Because you have 50 plus trillion cells in your body, you can't necessarily rewrite your DNA quite that fast. But this proves that DNA, by its very nature, can be rewritten in the presence of stress. So here's the pictures where I'm going to show you the mouth. It's not that bad. It kind of looks like peyote cactus, and of course, none of us here have ever done any psychedelic drugs. So here's the mouth, and that actual shape of the mouth changes. This is the one that really looks like, I don't know about you, that totally, to me, looks like psychedelic peyote cactus. And so who knows, maybe the worm is just tripping all the time, and it's just somehow rewriting its own DNA in the course of a psychedelic fugue. I have no idea. The point is, though, that I'm showing you this structure to illustrate that the ones who survived, they actually changed the shape of their body that is supposed to be fixed in that form. Now, here's another really weird one. Certain life forms that heal their own DNA by drawing out of the pure information from the universe. And we're going to talk about the Drosophila fruit fly. This is another really interesting one. Here's a Drosophila with its normal eyes as they would appear. Scientists have been screwing around with the fruit fly for, over 100 years in laboratories because it's very simple and it's expendable. Nobody's going to get all bent out of shape about torturing little fruit flies, at least unless there are people at this conference, in which case the bleeding heart liberals and ooh, I'm not going there. So it's the most frequently studied insect in science. What they do in these studies is they take the first cell, the original fertilized cell that made the embryo, and they splice out the code that makes the eyes. They remove it, which you would think would make it so that the eyes are going to be gone forever, because now there's no code to make eyes, right? And in the gene-based model, you have to have that code for the eyes. But instead, you have the first generation, as we expect, the fly doesn't have its eyes, but no matter what they've ever done, and they also breed it with other fruit flies who had the same modification. So we know the gene makes eyes, but somehow, no matter how they do it, after no more than 5 generations maximum, that's not very many, the eyes always come back. So this, it never takes more than 5 generations. Check this out. That on the left is a fruit fly that's had its eyes bred out. No matter what they've ever done, the eyes come back. Now, how is that happening? It can't be in the genes. But we've already seen how Budakovsky took the hologram of a healthy raspberry plant and zapped it into a tumor and rewrote the tumor cells. We've already seen how DNA is absorbing light. We've already seen that the light can carry the genetic code. So that means that around us in the room right now are photons that will tell you how to build a fruit fly if there's a fruit fly here. And if the fruit fly is missing its eyes, it's going to tell the fruit fly how to bring its eyes back. So one of the things I'm asking you to consider is that the photons that are telling your body how to ascend and how to metamorphosize into a new form, they're around us right now. But because you're not as small as a Caenorhabditis and you have a lot more than 969 cells, you already are ascending, and I'm going to have some really cool information on that, showing the genetic proof that it's happening to you. Now, here's another one that's really going to kind of cap off the whole discussion, the so-called immortal jellyfish, which throws even more of our assumptions out the window. Turritopsis nutricula. Now, this is just a fun fact I pulled off the internet. Jellyfish and lobsters are considered biologically immortal. They won't age and will never die unless they are killed. Yes, that's true. Now, this is the life cycle of a jellyfish. It goes through some very strange phases here. And the phases include the sperm and the egg, as you see on the top right. And then we have, it goes to the planula, which is then a polyp, which sticks itself into the ground. The polyp becomes a cyphistoma, where it starts to grow these little tendrils. And then it goes to a strobila, in which it gets layers. The strobila layers then break off and turn into medusas, which then become jellyfish. So that's basically how it works, and we don't need to go into a whole lot more informational depth than that. Here's what this little guy looks like. It's only the size of your pinky fingernail, so it's very small. But what has happened with this thing is totally freaking bizarre, because, as we're about to see here, let's get the slides up. Christian Sommer, a German marine biology student on the Italian Riviera in 1988, was snorkeling and gathering these little jellyfish in plankton nets. And what he found was that the Turritopsis refused to die. No matter how smashed up its body was, the raw material, the actual cells, would reabsorb back into each other and revert back into an embryo. It appeared that it was aging in reverse. Okay? That's immortality. That's ascension. That's the transformation of the body. And it's already happening on the genetic level. The paper was first published in 1996. Then, more recently, we have this Japanese guy, Shin Kubota of Kyoto University's Seto Marine Biological University. Studied this starting in 1979, so he was probably first, but they found it independently. He found a scarlet jellyfish that had many spikes stuck in its body in a plankton net. And he removed the spikes, hoping that the jellyfish would recover, but instead it folded in upon itself and reverted back to its original embryonic polyp state. So if you saw my talk at Conscious Life Expo in January, here's the guy, and Shin Kubota, and here's his book. And just to show you how dedicated he is when he does a conference, he is willing to dress up in this crazy outfit. He really wants you to know some valuable information with that. So this is pretty trippy because here's the cycle that we see. You have these medusas going around, you smash it up, but it actually turns back into an undifferentiated cyst that buds off and creates new plants. Why couldn't this be happening to us? It's a basic part of biological life. And these little jellyfish are doing that. So then the final capstone, which you guys have probably heard me say plenty of times if you've read my books or gone to my talks, is how you actually make DNA completely out of nothing, where no DNA had existed before. And of course, this brings us to Dr. Montagnier, who won a Nobel Prize for discovering the AIDS virus. AIDS is actually a series of symptoms, but it's related to HIV. So he discovered the HIV virus. He certainly has earned his street cred as a professional biologist. But in 2011, he came out with research showing that he could take water and make DNA grow in it, even if it was in a sealed container. And it's sterilized. And as I love to say, anybody who sits around with a bunch of test tubes and can look condescendingly at you over the top of his glasses clearly knows what he's talking about. All right, so here's the setup. You got a tube with DNA in it. That's what's on the left there. Then he puts it next to a series of tubes that have just plain water. He wraps a coil around it, which has 7 hertz electrical current going through it. And then he lets it sit like that for 18 hours. The tubes, after 18 hours, that have nothing but plain water in them, and they're capped off and they're sterilized, he finds DNA growing inside the water. DNA has grown. So that right there changes everything because it resolves the old chicken and the egg dispute. Which came first, the DNA or the energy that makes the DNA? The answer is it's the energy that makes the DNA. The energy that makes the DNA can take simple hydrogen and oxygen, the most simple molecules we have. Water is very simple, and can grow DNA in it, which means it's actually rearranging those molecules somehow. This just trips me out to no end. That's why I always try to talk about it, because we're surrounded by water. And so this has huge implications. So again, just to review very quickly, 2 hermetically sealed tubes. One has trace amounts of DNA in it. The other one does not. They get electrified. The electricity is the key because it's vibrating the DNA, and it sends out those photons. The vibration, the magnetic vibration, is what releases those stored photons. When those photons that make that DNA hit the water says, oh, I'm supposed to be making DNA now. And the photons actually rearrange the code. That's really amazing. So DNA appears to be a quantum field effect that does not require other life to exist first. And life forms are arranging spontaneously. Now here's another example of this, in which the Russians found plankton on the window of the space station, and they tried to figure out how the heck could it get up there, because there's not supposed to be any life in space. It's supposed to be a dead, empty void. Well, the Russian cosmonaut Solovyev thinks that the plankton was blown up into space from air currents on Earth. No, dude. Come on. Give me a break. Now, this one is a big mouthful. Ultrastructural and light microscopy analysis of sapobions, formation, and growth in vitro. Whoa! What's that all about? This guy's Professor Pacheco. This was actually a replication of one of a series of studies that was done by Wilhelm Reich, and probably something, if you've seen very much of my talks, you know about this. But it's awesome to put it in right now. If you take regular beach sand and you put the sand into a test tube and then let this stuff rise up to the top, there will be like this little kind of filmy material that comes up to the top. You scrape it off, you look at it under the microscope, and you get these little blobs. It doesn't look like anything. If, however, you sterilize the sand first, you heat it up so that it's white hot, 1,000 degrees Celsius, then at that level of heat, when you scrape it off and you look at it after 24 hours under a microscope, you see living things. Now, the only thing that's in that test tube is sand and water, but these are actual photographs of the life forms that grew inside the water, including these sea vegetables. Now, they've been broken up, and the roots have gotten broken off, and the leaves have gotten broken off as they made it to the microscopic slide, but they're growing in there. And there's no way that they should be. But yet you see there's complex biological structure here. And so in some of the shows on Gaia, I have multiple examples of how this has been done. It's been done in a whole different variety of configurations, mineral preparations, different types of minerals, different types of starters. In this case, the starter is just sand that's been sterilized. The sterilization creates a pure silicon, so the sand just gets reverted to its original silicon state. And this looks like a white blood cell, but here we have what looks like the beginning of a shellfish, which we see some of the calcium deposits starting to grow that will make the shell. And then in this one, we really see that the seashell is starting to grow, because you can actually see how it's starting to wrap its way around the soft body. And you can see the point where the bottom of the shell would be. But the favorite one of all for me is this guy. As I've so often said, he's like the sea porcupine. You can see he has a head and a mouth, and he has an advanced defense system, so that if any of these other little things that are growing in that sterilized beach sand and water try to eat him, they're not going to have good luck. So I asked this question. Let's say, for example, that his DNA has the same amount of genes as the roundworm, 24,000. Where the heck did his 24,000 genes come from? Where did his DNA come from? There's energy around us right now that's going to make him wherever there's beach sand and water. Those photons are around us right now. The photons that will make you ascend are around us right now. They're activating our DNA and activating our ascension right now. Your DNA is absorbing photons all the time. Even as you sit here, your body is happily doing this. It's absorbing light constantly. You just don't usually notice it. And we don't have a way to tell. It's just the light that's inside of us has to do with our level of inspiration. So some of these scientists, such as a group in Japan, discovered that people who had sickness in certain parts of their bodies, that there was less light in the areas where the tissue is damaged. And as the tissue heals, the light comes back. What the heck is acupuncture? Acupuncture is people saying that they have to put little needles into your certain meridians, and stimulating a meridian over here or in your hand or something activates an organ system and sends light into the organ system. Well, acupuncture has been studied scientifically, and it turns out that the exact areas that the Chinese discovered however many thousand years ago were the acupuncture points are actually the areas of the largest amount of electrical charge on the skin. So they somehow knew that, and I believe that's the result of, again, extraterrestrials. So now that I've built up this new life science for you, and I've taken that direction, I want to switch gears now, and this is another really big part of the whole ascension discussion that I'm going to, you're going to see how much this factors in. It's a big, big scientific payoff. So let's take a look at fractals now. I'm going to show you some really, really cool stuff. This is the Mandelbrot set. It was discovered by a scientist who was analyzing the behavior of electrical signals in telephone wires. And I believe it was AT&T was trying to figure out why there's static in certain areas of the country in the telephone electrical wiring grid. And he plotted out where the faults were and did it over a huge, huge area. And when he put all that data together, he got this graph. So that has to do somehow with where the static is going and why does it build up in certain places. Then he's walking down the hall where he's working at MIT, and he looks in the window of another room, and on the chalkboard is the same illustration. But in this case, it has to do with the fluctuation between rabbit and fox populations. The rabbits eat the foxes eat the rabbits. Well, no, that's not true. The rabbits don't eat foxes. So it's been a long frickin' weekend, you guys. Wow. Going into a trance state now. Anyway, you know what fractals are. Let's just zoom into that sucker. So there's self-similarity at all levels. This one is fairly good, but this next image that I found is really good. Check this out. So this is some kind of function that just iterates and iterates and iterates. And notice the same image, like right there, boom, there's another one. You zoom in more and more and more, and no matter how far in you go, you keep seeing the same structures, the same patterns repeating again and again and again. And there's no limit to how much you can zoom in. There it is again, boom. And you just keep zooming into the tiniest little portion. And it comes back, and it comes back, and it comes back. So what I'm saying is that you are literally looking at how the universe was created. The universe fractalized out from a singular point. And as you look at this and you see how far fractals can go, it actually starts to make sense that the whole entire universe could be built under a system like this. So what is the original fractal? What is the original form? What is the Mandelbrot set when we look at the universe? Well, one of the keys that helps us is that you can fractalize geometry as well. So we're looking at the example right now with star shapes. And when I trigger this animation, you can see that, in fact, you can fractal out stars. So geometry can do the same thing. You can zoom in indefinitely on geometry, and it'll just give you more and more. So this is my argument, and if you've been following my work, and everybody here has, or at least most of you have, then you know that the sacred geometry has been a big, big part of this. And what I like to obsess on is these 5 forms. The tetrahedron, which if you look up now, there's 4 lights on the wall here, which happen to be tetrahedron lights. So that's really cool. That's one of the things I really like about lecturing in this room. It always kind of reminds me of that. The octahedron, the cube, the icosahedron, and the dodecahedron. Now, these are all fractals of each other. And another way to say that is that they all nest inside of each other. Each one of them grows out of one of the others. And they all grow out of each other. So I'll show you how this works. And it doesn't require any science. It's just a visual that you can see. You can fit a cube and a dodec together. So you got this 5-sided geometry that's light green, and then you got the 8-sided geometry, or the 4-sided per face, with the cube there. So each cube, if you look at the top, you see it looks like a little rooftop, like a little house. You just put a rooftop on each of the faces of the cube, and you're done. You got a dodec, just like that. So now we're going to look at, you can see now how those 2 shapes, cube and dodecahedron, 2 of the 5, they fit together so beautifully. The tetrahedron fits beautifully inside the cube. And here's how that works. Notice that there's no overlap. All you're doing is you're taking 4 of the 8 corners of the cube and connecting the dots together diagonally across the cube face. and you get that tetrahedron, just like we see it in the chandeliers here. And then you can put two of them together, and that makes the Merkaba. And we're going to talk a lot about this in a minute, because this is actually the key to understanding the universe. The Merkaba is everything. Then we can take the octahedron and fit it inside the tetrahedron beautifully by just connecting the dots like we see right here. So that Merkaba has the octahedron inside of it. And then, last but not least, this is the really tricky one, the hardest one to see, is how the icosahedron fits inside the octahedron. This is where you got to kind of do something strange. You can't just bisect the middle now. You got to do it off to the side. So you see now how there's an equilateral triangle on each of the 8 sides of the octahedron, but you'll notice that we're making now this kind of funny triangle inside each face that's sort of offset by what looks like maybe 30 degrees. And you make those offset triangles on each face and then connect the dots, and inside you get this octahedron. So notice also, you can see it here, and you could also see it in the previous illustration, that the geometry tilts. It's like a rotational vortex type of movement. There's a tilt angle on the icosahedron compared to the octa. It goes whoop and goes off to the side. Here's another visualization of it, another way that we can see this. The icosahedron inside the octahedron. So then again, here's that little weird triangle that I said is offset. And the funny part is that you get this classic ratio. And you all are so cool, I don't even need to say it. It's the Fibonacci.
Doorways, megalithic.
I have no words. Apparently, no words. I guess these wireless mics broadcast really well, but since I'm not wireless, we can just mute that wireless mic on the mixing board, and hopefully that will solve the problem, because we're getting interference from somebody else's wireless mic. I think that's what it is, which shows the energy is really good out here. It's broadcasting over quite a long distance. So look, all it is you take the length of the entire side, that's a 1. You take the length of where the sacred cut is, right? And that's a 0.618. That's your Fibonacci, your golden mean. So all of these things that are the regulation of life and growth and development, it's written right into the geometry itself, which that, to me, just really trips me out and is very, very cool. Okay. Now, last but not least, the dodeca and the icosahedron, that's an easy one. Because really, it's just flipping it inside out. You can see it very clearly how well they fit together. There's a pentagonal theme in both. And it works, and it fits, meshes very, very nicely. And we see, in this illustration, just another example of the same thing. So all of them nest together, and they're all fractal, right? So think about this. You can take that same principle of fractals and zooming through things and show how you could zoom through this just by expanding them. Like if you expand the amount of energy that they have, the size that they have, you pump them up, and they twist, and as the lines continue changing, you can ratchet one shape into another. And that's a very, very important point. And here's where it gets even more trippy. All you have to do is use spheres. You take individual spheres that are all the same size, and then you start putting them together, and that's called close packing. So this whole science of close packed spheres, how many spheres can you fit together as tightly as possible? What you're seeing here is the Merkaba made of close packed spheres. All the same geometry I was showing you, it's just a function of spheres. There's another Merkaba made out of spheres. Here's the octahedron made out of spheres, and here's another example. And then what we have is the octahedron with the cube around it, again, all made out of spheres. You add more spheres, and then you get this. Now you got your icosahedron, dodecahedron, and you can invert it. So this actually shows that the universe is building, this is my interpretation, is the universe is building little spheres of energy. And those little spheres packed together, they're attracted to each other. and they form this geometry, and this is the basis of all reality. It fractalizes out. So this comes to us now, this idea that the universe could be built from this stuff is part of a great scientific breakthrough that, in my view, changes everything that we thought we knew. And you've heard me say this before, I'm sure, by now. If not, this is going to blow your doors off. But it had to be mentioned. And you're going to hear some new things about it that I discovered only at the last talk. So only if you saw the last talk will this be familiar to you. That was the one I did at Conscious Life Expo. If you haven't seen it, this is going to rock your world. It did for me. So this came out in 2013, and I had basically what you could call a geekgasm when I read this. I start running. I literally wanted to unbuckle my seatbelt as we're climbing in altitude in an airplane and run up and down the aisles, screaming with joy. It all makes sense. It all makes sense. Which probably would have made me learn really quickly where the federal air marshal who's packing a concealed weapon was. And I would be zip-tied, and I would have a very painful flight. And then I'd be all known as the conspiracy theorist who went crazy on the airplane. Why did I want to run up and down? Because of this. Because of what these guys discovered. Nima Arkani-Hamed and Yaroslav Trunka. This blew me away. Here's what they look like. Two scientists from Caltech. And what they did was to go through and analyze all of the scientific information that's available to them about quantum physics and particles and how particles are formed and what kind of jitters and waves appear in the subatomic level. And scientists have spent so much time analyzing just how two little particles interact with each other. You shoot this particle out of this gun, you shoot this particle out of this gun. Do they come together? Do they fall apart? And how do they interact? And it creates a little squiggly pattern. And there are 90-page long equations for each squiggle. Those are called the Feynman diagrams. And I was on stage with the physicist Nassim Haramein at one point, and he confirmed that the Feynman diagrams are the bane of all physicists. It's just horrible. So if you got to do 90 pages of calculations for each one of these squiggles, and there's thousands of them, you could lose your frickin' mind trying to make sense out of this stuff. But these guys discovered that you can take all of those different diagrams for each squiggle and solve all of them with a single pattern, a single geometric form. Solves all those squiggles beautifully, perfectly, and elegantly. How does this work? The shape itself they called the amplituhedron, and another name for it that's even more outrageous is the positive Grassmannian. That's just an esoteric physics term. Here's what it looks like. But that diagram didn't do very much for me. Now remember, in this case, the geometry is what's really important. The sine waves that you see along each line are meant to illustrate how the geometry, it doesn't just sit there, it's jiggling. But their theory is that the jiggles of the geometry are actually expanding out into the entire frickin' cosmos. Now again, that's kind of hard to visualize, except that I just showed you the fractals, the Mandelbrot set. And I showed you how you can zoom in on that sucker, and no matter how far you go, you keep seeing more and more and more. So this one little guy is jiggling, and it expands and expands and expands and becomes all the stars, all the galaxies, all the planets, and all the life in the entire frickin' universe, moment by moment. But the only thing that really exists is this little shape. That's really frickin' trippy. And so here's the actual diagram of the underlying geometry that is wiggling and making the whole universe. Now, Sir Roger Penrose in the 1970s got pretty close. This was his idea. He didn't quite nail it, but he got a lot of the math right, and then these guys just came in and basically completed his work. And it actually was a simpler geometric pattern than what Penrose thought it was. It's basically 4 tetrahedrons stuck together. Just like these tetrahedrons on the wall. We got 4 on the wall. You could take these down, fit them together, and make that shape. That's all it is. Now, what did I see? Right away, I said, whoa, this is why I wanted to run up and down the aisles. That's just part of the Merkaba. And you fit the whole thing together and you get this. Really? We got to get some air conditioning in here. People are getting crazy. It's gone there. And I still got 2 hours to go. All right. We're having fun. It's all good. So I want to show you how they morph together now. Check this out. So here we start with the original shape that they found. Now we got this guy, so let's look at what happens. You can clearly see that these two shapes grow out of each other, and that the Merkaba is just a larger form. But again, because this shape is so symmetrical, they only needed to find 4 of the tetrahedrons to build the whole pattern that explained all of quantum mechanics. They didn't need to get the whole thing. And because the geometry is fractal, it all worked out. Now, oh, the Tibetan Buddhists, right? That's some ancient skeptic now talking. Oh, that's just some ancient culture. They didn't know anything. What do the Tibetans actually say the universe was made from? That trips me out, because what they're saying is that this shape is the original shape of the universe, and that it expands, and they actually equate that with a sound that they call Aum. They say that the expansion of the original shape makes a humming noise, which wouldn't it do that, right? There's going to be a vibration. There's going to be something happens as this. Sound is just vibration, right? So as that little guy, that little geometry goes, it's vibrating and it's making a sound. And so what they would also teach in their ascension teachings is that if you make the same sound, then you actually, are you filming? Oh no, she's not filming. Okay. Yeah, we don't want filming here. It's just like, I can't keep doing the same talk over and over again and not get caught if it ends up on the internet. No, I always do it different, but it's, I try to keep things a little bit more organized. And anyway, you got in here late, so you didn't hear me say that. It's all good. So, this one is another Buddhist mandala, which trips me out. Why? Because it's got the geometry within geometry in it. And again, what they're saying is, there is this shape, that the actual shape for the vowel ah, they make that shape, and it's called a tigli. And so one of the illustrations you see in these ascension diagrams from the Tibetans is the tigli shape, this actual Sanskrit character for ah, with a rainbow around it. And what they teach is that the whole universe is the rainbow that emanated from this original shape. But in other diagrams, they show it as a geometry. So is this just some boring old thing that doesn't mean anything? Or is this the result of extraterrestrials who already knew all the stuff that we're just now learning? And they know that this is the secret to ascension, because if you visualize yourself as the Merkaba, if you start to do that meditation, then you are actually reorienting your mind with your primal identity. The Tibetans taught us that the primal identity must be reaccessed, and it can only be done with meditation. So they tell you that your mind is empty and your mind is aware. Empty awareness. And it's supposed to be something that's the whole universe. So they would teach you, as I said, if you saw my talk in the amphitheater, they would teach you to meditate on like a big, gorgeous mountain view. And imagine that you're projecting your awareness into that view so that your mind now engulfs the entire area that you're looking at. This is why these guys that ascended were in the Himalayas, because they would do this practice as they looked at mountains. It's why I live in the mountains. Same thing. I deliberately do that, even though it takes me frickin' 20 minutes to drive to any type of civilization. It's worth it. Pretty soon I'll be levitating into civilization. So, awareness that is empty. That's what you get when you get in touch with this geometry. They teach you to recognize in meditation that you are the awareness of the universe, that awareness is you. And then you acquire what in the Law of One is called personality transparency. Now here's where it gets controversial. The Masonic symbol, the square and compass, oh, wait a minute. It's the same geometry. The seed of the universe. The G means God or geometry. The compass is what you use to draw circles, and the square is what you use to draw straight edges. That's the equipment that you would use to draw the geometry. So this does appear to have come to them from extraterrestrials who already knew what the heck this thing was. Now, unless you saw the talk that I gave on Monday night at Conscious Life Expo, this should be new to you. Was anybody here for the Monday night Conscious Life Expo? I know you were. Anybody else? How many? Okay, not too many. You were there. I remember that. Okay. This is awesome. You guys are going to be excited for this because you're all big fans of this stuff. You've watched everything, read everything. I saw this. It totally tripped me out. What I realized was that these guys who are academically studying this geometric pattern, they never really saw what it was. And it thundered in on my head after I'd done a talk on Saturday at Conscious Life Expo. So there's only like 5 of you in the room who saw that I made this connection. I realized that the geometry of the original thing is a photon, which is so important, right? Because what did I just say about photons? I said that DNA attracts them, that the photon carries the genetic code, and that the photons can actually make DNA molecules out of water. And the photons can rewrite sick tissue into healthy tissue. The photons are the life force that's sucked out of you if somebody is an energy vampire. So this photon, when we hear these ancient esoteric traditions, what do they always say? In the beginning there was the light. The light was the first thing that was created. So this now, we got to look at it as not just some ancient thing, but it's extraterrestrial download. Because their scientists already figured all this stuff out. Now we got to redo the work. So what is that geometry? It's a photon. How do we prove this? We go back to this guy, Dr. Max Planck, who actually studied quantum level and came up with the infamous Planck's constant. And I swear to God, this is the only equation you're going to hear in the talk, except for the ones that were flying at you at the beginning. That's it. So Max Planck's big discovery was that energy is quantized. Energy travels in individual packets. Now, we're going to see that those packets are ultimately the geometry I just showed you. And I'm going to prove that to you. The size of the packets, and the packets, of course, are photons. That's part of the science. So all energy is made of photons. The photons are individual. Up until then, they didn't know if it was a steady stream or if it was individual bursts. Now we know light is a series of individual bursts that are packets. But as you pump them up and you put more energy into them as they're released, they will get larger. And so there's a proportion, there's a set amount of how much they get larger depending on how much energy you pump in. And this suggests that there is a consistent structure underlying the expansion. And this creates a ratio or a constant. So this is measured, the way that Planck calculated the constant was by looking inside a cube of space and then making an arbitrary measurement of the cube's volume of 10. He just picked a number. There's nothing more to it than that. He just decided it was 10. So that's really important. The volume of the cube is 10. So now watch the magic. The science says that this is the equation. And again, it's a very, very simple equation. This is about as easy as it gets. E is energy, and V is the velocity, E is the energy, the amount of energy you pump in, V is the volume. See, I can't even get a freaking simple variable equation correct. I'm in trouble. V is the frequency. H is Planck's constant. So what it shows is that as the energy pumps up, the packets get larger in size, and they do it by a set proportion. So it's about as simple as you could ever get. That's a geometric relationship. So here's the actual measurement of Planck's constant, 6.626 times 10 to the minus 34. Now, that 6.626 is a dimensionless constant, which means that it stays the same regardless of the size of the packet, and it's all based on 10 being the full volume of the cube. So let's think about that. 6.6 out of 10. That's 2/3 exactly. This is going to become very significant. Now here's, I had to throw this one in. Two great human advances. In 1899, Planck's constant, the proportionality constant between the energy of a photon and the frequency of its wave. 2011, planking, the phenomenon of being photographed while lying Planck-like on an object, and subsequent distribution of the image via social media. Just so we can get it clear, you know? Two great human advancements. So this is where it's so trippy. Check this out. The tetrahedron fills exactly 1/3 of the volume of a cube. So if the cube's volume is 10, 1/3 is 3.333. But the Merkaba is 2 tetrahedrons. That's going to fill a total of 2/3 or 6.666. And then when you crank it through Coulomb's equation, it drops down a little bit. And that's just the permittivity of space. But basically, you got Planck's constant being 6.6. So it totally fits. And again, the energy of the vacuum, Coulomb's equation, drops it a little bit. But anyway, check this out. Photons are tetrahedral Merkabas. And I spent years talking to a scientist named Rod Johnson who taught me all this stuff. He'd independently figured this out, and then later figured out that Buckminster Fuller had also concluded that photons were Merkabas because of this. So I didn't make this up. Two different credentialed scientists independently came up with this. And it's a very, very significant point, because what it shows us is that all these light patterns, the light that we see is the fractal. Now think about what I just said. There's one seed that the whole universe is made from. When I showed you the Mandelbrot set and we're zooming in on that sucker, as we zoom in, what do we keep seeing? Images of the original. If nothing else exists in the universe except for photons, they're all images of the original. The original photon has now been discovered by these scientists who did this totally outrageous math, and the original photon appears in Tibetan Buddhist mandalas from like 1,200 years ago or more. So this obviously is really, really trippy. So here you have the tetrahedron inside the cube, just so you can really, really get this. We know scientifically that's 1/3 the volume of the cube. And when you put the two of them together, the photon, actually what happens is they stretch out like this. So they go face to face. And then as it passes through the cube, it totally moves out through 2/3 of the volume. And this shape that we're looking at right now is the shape that photons look like when they've been studied in the lab. They don't quite get the corners, but this actual shape is what, it's pretty close to what the scientists get, because they make it look like this elongated form. It's just the corners in the middle, they don't quite get that yet. So what does this mean? This means that this brand new science, this really exciting thing that these guys figured out, is actually, they discovered the photon. They haven't gone that far. They haven't figured it out yet, that they found the first photon in the universe. But it's the only photon in the universe because everything comes from the light. Wow. See why I got so excited when I figured this out? That amplituhedron is not just any old thing. It's a photon. And that validates all these spiritual teachings that the universe is made of intelligent light. And then the light, the whole basis of the fractalizing of the light is geometry. So if you're not tripping already, you're about to go a lot deeper down the rabbit hole. So what's the first thing that this photon does is it fractalizes. It turns into a sphere. It fractalizes out into a big sphere. And that's the first star of the universe, the primordial sun. It makes itself into that. Then that first star starts to bud off smaller stars and those planets eventually become stars. And eventually it buds and buds and buds and fractalizes out into a super galaxy. That's the big galaxy that we now know is where all the other galaxies in the universe are located in. The universe is not just a big sphere in which there's equal matter distribution all the way through the sphere. It's a flat disk. And the blueprints of this are still visible in the universe. So I'm going to remind you of something here, because this really tripped me out. This was one of the discoveries I made a couple months ago. And, you know, I just got so excited. Let's go back to the Merkaba diagram for a minute, okay? Now let's remember that the original photon, the amplituhedron, the Merkaba, the original photon, is this little guy standing up straight so the axis goes up and down like this. Now, so there's one example of it, and you can see that, again, the octahedron hides inside the photon, hides inside the tetrahedron, okay? But notice that there is a tilt that you have to do. I'm just showing you different versions of the same thing. This is the one I wanted. So there's your Merkaba, okay? Let's assume that the top and bottom of the universe, the original top and bottom of the universe, is going to be the top and bottom of the Merkaba, and that the whole universe has been formed from this one little guy. And it just burst. It just exploded and created this massive amount of volume of stars. And those stars are going to be held together by geometric fields because they're resonating in geometric patterns. And that's jumping a little bit ahead. But I want you to check this out first. Now imagine, if you can, that this guy is just bursting out. It's just expanding at an incredible rate of speed. And as it does so, it's shooting off dust because it's creating stuff. Now check out this octahedron here, and imagine that this octahedron is also expanding and creating dust and belching out dust at the same time that the octahedron, that the Merkaba, is forming the whole universe. So notice the tilt. Notice the tilt angle. I was so excited when I saw this. Why? Because the universe has an octahedron-shaped dust pattern at the far edges. The dust of that shape is still out there in this so-called supergalaxy. So there's the supergalaxy. Now you don't really see anything yet, but this is where all the galaxies are in the middle. It's a big flat disk. We only see it from the side because we don't have the ability to go up there where we can look down on it. But we know that it's a big galaxy. But then you got all this extra dust that kind of blew off around it on the top and the bottom. This is the entire universe. This is a map of the visible. I'm sorry if I didn't make that clear. Got 179 IQ points blowing around in my head like a fucking popcorn popper. Okay? Try to keep up with me if you can. Why did I have to drop the F-bomb? Can't I just let go of that? My goodness. It's fun, though. I'm from New York. That's what we do. Okay. So, yeah, this is the map of the universe. This is everything there is based on telescopic observation. Now, if these guys have discovered that the only thing that really exists in the center of the universe is the Merkaba, and the Merkaba went goosh and burst out, and a lot of dust was created as it expanded, oh my God. What we see here is this pattern on the same tilt angle as where the octahedron is inside the Merkaba. And when you wrap this thing around, because remember, this is like a Mercator projection of the Earth's globe, you got to make it into a globe, and what do you get? An octahedron. Holy crap. So this is a visible piece of evidence that when this little guy exploded and created the entire frickin' universe in that moment of creation, that the octahedron inside shot off all this dust. Notice the tilt angle, and I'm going to bring you right back here. It's the same thing. All that dust right now, whatever it is, 18 trillion years later, it's still in the same pattern. So let's take a look now. Think about fractals. What was he saying? What was that dude saying? He was talking about fractals. He was talking about geometry. He said that the geometry fractals too, because he was saying that the different types of geometry are nested inside of each other, and one goes into the other, and I showed you the cube with the dodecahedron and all this stuff, right? So the geometry is always going to be there. The geometry are like the lines of force that hold everything together. They're exerting pressure. Geometry exerts pressure that we would interpret as gravity. There's gravitational pressure that's holding things in a certain position. So what happens to the galaxies inside the supergalaxy as they form? They form into a geometric pattern that scientists call the egg carton universe. Wait till you see this stuff. This is a kind of difficult diagram to really make out very much from. But you notice that there is a series of approximately 4 or 5 squares in it. And the geometry, if you look carefully, you can see that these blobs kind of are hugging the geometry. In fact, they're hugging it very well. That's no good, though. The one that really, really rocked me, and I saw this back in like 99 or 2000, was this. This is our local neighborhood, folks. What's that in the middle? You see where it says sun up at the top? And then there's an arrow that goes into the middle between the two octahedrons. That's a gigantic blob of millions and trillions, well, billion, I don't know how many. I don't freaking know, but it's a lot. Millions of galaxies. It's called a galactic supercluster. So we're talking about absolutely vast-sized areas. And what you're seeing here is a series of squiggly lines or blobs that correspond to where the galaxies congregate. These are galaxies. I'm talking about gigantic amounts of millions of galaxies for each blob. So if you look at this, this is a blob that is filled with millions and millions and millions, if not more, of galaxies. And they line up. They look at the corners, right? Look at the top, the bottom, each of the corners of each octahedron. There's a blob with all these galaxies hanging out there. And notice that along the lines, especially in the middle, that there's galaxies that form along the lines. So this is showing you that the universe has fractalized out of that original photon. I don't know anybody else that's ever put this together besides me, which is pretty freaking cool. Thank you. I had a stodgy old grandfather who was a PhD engineer. And long before I'd even made it this far, I was telling him some of my physics breakthroughs, and he said, "Well, David, if what you find out is actually true, then it's worthy of a Nobel Prize." And that was like the best compliment he ever paid me in my life, because he was not into any of the stuff that I'm doing at all. But, you know, you're not going to get a Nobel Prize for this stuff, because it integrates too many things, and they don't want this to break out into the mainstream, right? They want to keep this occult. They don't want you to know this stuff. So then the other thing that's weird is that it actually stacks up 3 high throughout the universe. For some weird reason, the super galaxy is made of stacks of octahedrons that go 3 high, and then the one that we're in is at the bottom. We're in the middle. So here's a map of what the 3 high octahedrons look like when you see them in larger groups, and because there's tons of these that make up the super galaxy, that's why they call it the egg carton universe. Okay? Because in the areas between where the geometry is, those are called voids. There are no galaxies because it's all vibrating, and the vibration is geometric. So the galaxies can only form where the vibration allows them to go. Now, the circle makers, we had Patty Greer on the panel last night talking about crop circles, right? And that was pretty cool. Yeah, a lot of you guys were there. And I wanted her on the panel to help set this up today because what we were asking, is there a message in the crop circles, okay? Some of the sacred geometry, and a lot of the sacred geometry that I'm talking about shows up in the crop circles. So this, for example, is the fractalizing octahedron that made the universe. That's what I believe it is. It's showing how it's fractalizing out. And then I remember at one point, I'm trying to think about the idea of all these octahedrons forming a big giant galaxy, and what would that actually look like? And I'm thinking, I want to draw this. I want to commission an artist to draw the super galaxy made out of octahedrons. And I'm trying to visualize this in my head, and I'm thinking about it, and it didn't even take 30 seconds. And I went, oh my God, there's a crop circle that already drew it. Right there. How the hell did that thing form in a bunch of wheat? Oh yeah, it's an army of hedgehogs running round and round. Two drunk chaps named Doug and Dave came over with a few pints in the bellies and got a funny cap, a string, and a board. Starting to turn into Monty Python now, right? This is an X-parrot. That's an inside joke if you know Monty Python. I could still fight you, honestly. Huh? Oh, my God. Now I want to downshift. I want to downshift to galaxies and again blow your mind. And this is another thing that I've been holding on to that I've only publicly released starting at the last expo. I didn't know when I was going to release this, but the time became right. So, what we usually see for a galaxy diagram is this idealized version of the Milky Way. This is not real. This is a fabrication based on existing kind of how it looks and very elaborate art, but notice that it's very spiraling. It's very circular. And then, of course, it says there, all the stars you can see in the sky fit into that tiny little red circle at the bottom. So all the rest is outside of our visible range. That's how big this thing is. Well, is there any proof? Is there any really tangible, undeniable, obvious, smack you in the face with a 2x4 plank kind of proof, bang, that shows that there's something going on with certain galaxies, at least, if not all of them, and I believe it's all of them, in which geometry is controlling them, that they're actually geometric, so that resonance of that original photon is actually affecting them. What you're about to see is a nebula. Now, a nebula is sort of like a galaxy. It's an emitter or a cloud of gas. And the gas is very colorful. Well, wait a minute. What about this nebula right here? Does this look normal to you? It's going to turn. Bang. That is HD 44179. And you can see there is an emitter in the middle. And the gases, the dust that's coming out, are precisely organized into a geometric pattern. And remember, this is not flat. It's not flat. So what are we actually looking at? We're looking at octahedrons. This is actually, it's like a big giant cube. But there's two octahedrons in there, and you're seeing the sides of them. So those octahedral energy fields actually are exerting pressure, gravitational pressure. There is a cubical or octahedron gravity field that is containing that dust in a structure, just like it contains, the gravity contains those galaxies in the egg carton structure, the super galaxies. There's another one. Now, if you only found one of these, it's crazy enough, but they found two of them so far. That's just the ones I've been able to see. This, again, would be a cube in space. It is not flat. Now I want to go through and show you some galaxies, and when you start looking at the way they actually look, you realize, wait a freaking minute. We have been lied to. There's a very intrinsic aspect of science that is being overlooked. So let's check out M61. You don't have to look at that very long, or just if you want to cheat, go and look at the top left in the headline. galactic hexagon. You take a look at that and tell me that you don't see that there's a hexagon hanging out in the middle, that there is some kind of geometry that is holding those galactic spiral arms in place in a shape pattern, a geometric pattern. Nobody, hardly anybody has ever talked about this, and even this galactic hexagon article only used M61. They didn't realize that it was actually working on many, many other galaxies. Another one that is amazing is NGC 1232. Look at that. You see pentagons. So galaxies are not curving. And you can see geometry within geometry. If you look carefully, you can see it's not just one level. It goes in, it ratchets in. Now let's turn this, first of all, we're going to flip it over to the other side, like that. Then we're going to tilt it 90 degrees clockwise, and we get this. Now this is an X-ray diagram, and this is very, very important. Most of the time, when the astronomers really want to know what a galaxy looks like, they have to use this type of shape, this type of illustration. What are we seeing? If you go back to the previous illustration for a moment, let me do that. A lot of what you're seeing here is not stars. You're seeing reflected light that's coming off of dust. So you don't actually get to see visually where all the stars are. The light can glow brightly enough that the actual locations, the positions of the stars, can get screwed up. The glow is kind of overshadowing that stuff. So you need to see an X-ray diagram in order to find the geometry. Well, check this out. All you got to do is start drawing some lines in here, and you can very easily see the pentagonal geometry. So let me back it up again, just so now you know what I'm showing you. You can exactly see where that sucker was as it comes back in. And there's others as well that are easily seeable. So this is kind of unfortunate, but what it means is that this type of X-ray diagram, this boring black and white diagram, is what we need to look at in order to actually find the geometry of the galaxies. If you don't see it this way, the photograph alone is not going to show it to you. So the images that I'm pulling from now are from this, which is called the Revised Shapley-Ames Catalog. And it just goes through all the different types of galaxies that are out there. Now this is a very nice, organized collection of all the different types of galaxies that are out there. And I went through all of them one by one. I looked at every single picture on this website. And I found that approximately 85 to 90% of them had geometric features. And the others were just kind of too indistinct to really make it out, but that doesn't mean it's not there. If 85 to 90% of them show geometry, and I'm only going to show you some of the best, then we have a new law of nature that nobody is telling us about. So here's NGC 3646. The visible light photo shows a very clear hexagonal pattern there, but when you look at it in the X-ray, it's even more obvious. You can see the sharp, straight line. You can see the hexagon. And that one, where they tighten it up even more into the blue range of the X-rays, they break it down into spectrums as well. You can see it even more. And there's the dust configuration. The dust actually shows it in this case very nicely as well. And there's many, 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 many galaxies that I can do this with, but because we only have 3 hours, I'm not going to do a whole lot of them. If you haven't already figured this out, if you've seen my stuff before, all of this science that I'm showing you can be explained by what they call cymatics. Cymatics is the study by Dr. Hans Jenny, that's how you pronounce that name, even though it looks like Jenny, the J is silent, it's like a Y. So Dr. Hans Jenny studied a drop of water, and he put particles in the water, and it's normally going to just look like milk. There's nothing distinct in the water. Now, when he vibrated the water at certain pure sound frequencies, oh my God. Now, most of you guys have already seen this, so I'm not getting the orgasmic gasping that I normally would expect to have. Okay. Don't actually do it. That was only a joke. Check it out. You have a fluid, you have particles in the fluid, and you get the Merkaba. Oh, now everybody's going to try to flood the bathroom at the same time. Oh, I know this part. Fuck David. I got to piss, dude. Hey, look, it's not my fault. They made me have a 3-hour talk, and I can't have the time to have a break in the middle, so there you go. We're just going to blaze on through this thing. So, let's keep going. As you change the vibration, the geometry changes as well. You play a different sound into the water. That's all this is a drop of water with sand in it. You change the sound, you get different types of geometry that form. Just exactly like how I showed you that the different Platonic solids, those different geometries that the universe is built from, change their form as the frequency changes. There's the proof. Well, guess what? These little guys, this fluid vibration, is exactly what the galaxies are doing on the supergalactic level. The whole frickin' universe is structured this way, which shows that ultimately this one Merkaba form, the original photon, the universe itself is like a fluid. It's like a fluid. There's some kind of fluid-like energy out there. And as the Merkaba vibrates and it fractalizes, it's actually fractalizing as a vibration, a fluid-like vibration. And then when you change the frequency, you get different geometry. In fact, here we have a list of 9 different shapes, all from the same drop of water, all with the same sand inside, and they form stable patterns that do not change the way they look unless you change the frequency. We don't actually, I mean, you could probably go back to the original video and listen to the frequency that created the Merkaba. I don't know. But it would also be a function of the size and the volume of the drop of water and how spherical it really is. There was another guy, and that was Dr. Buckminster Fuller, who took a spherical balloon and dipped it in dye and then vibrated the balloon at different sound frequencies, and he could get any of the Platonic solids to form over the balloon, because that's where the dye would be able to collect, is along the geometry where it's vibrating. And, you know, because it's like the vibrations, this is like if you think about a guitar string. You ever pluck a guitar string, you look at it, and there will be these little areas called nodes where the string doesn't move up and down, it just stays in one place. Each of these corners are vibrational nodes. Those are the areas where the vibration is not moving as much. And so what happens is there's all these little sand particles inside these shapes, and they're on the go. They're moving all through the whole structure. They don't just sit there. But the form stays consistent. So in terms of the universe, we have these universal geometric fields which are holding the galaxies in position, thus forming the egg carton. We have these fields holding the galactic arms in position, thus causing those weird geometric angles on the arms that I just showed you. Then when you take larger amounts of water, like we would have in the universe, the equivalent fluid medium of the universe, you take larger amounts, you put sand in that, and then you increase the frequency, you get multicellular structure. The same image keeps reiterating and reiterating, and then when you crank the frequency up, it changes to a different pattern, and notice once again you have that octahedron type of pattern, just like we saw with the galaxies. So this is essentially now advanced egghead physics that proves that the universe is a vibration of light that also has a sound quality. It's really amazing, because think about what this could mean if all the atoms on Earth are at one frequency now. What happens if the frequency increases? There could be some other level of reality that's around us right now that we don't have access to because we're not at the same vibration. And that is what we know, that there are cloaking systems run by the government and the various black ops programs that can, what they call mask. Most people call it cloaking. They actually call it masking, according to Pete Peterson. And they already have it for airplanes. They can mask out an airplane. You'll still hear it going through the air, but you won't see it. The photons just bend around it. Now, this goes directly down to the quantum level, and you've probably all seen me talk about this before. Some of you, this might be new, probably not very many. Does anybody not know who Dr. Robert Moon is? Raise your hand if you don't know. Oh, now wait a minute. Okay. That means you haven't all watched every episode of the show. That's good. This is in some of the older episodes. I'm glad that you don't know this already. That makes me feel good. Okay. So now I get to do my Dr. Robert Moon jokes. So anyway, this is one of the guys who worked on the original nuclear program. He worked on the original Manhattan Project that developed the nuclear bomb. So he certainly has credibility as a scientist. And he looks pretty freaking paranoid in this photo. And I would be too if I'd build a nuclear bomb. There might be some people who would decide the world would be better off without me. And apparently, if you want to be a genius scientist, A, you need to have a blackboard behind you with equations on it, and B, you need to grow your hair out like wavy gravy. And I'm pretty sure that's a pocket protector in his front pocket there. He's definitely got the college professor look for sure. Now, Dr. Robert Moon had come across to us as the scientist who developed the nuclear bomb, but then he had this tremendous scientific insight in 1987. And we are now getting some very, very much needed ventilation in the room. So give them a big round of applause, everybody. We've been freaking dying in here. This is awesome. The actual exterior temperature is better than the air conditioning. Go figure. On a day that was only like 115 degrees. All right. So, genius scientist who figured out how to make a nuclear bomb. In order to do that, you got to play around with subatomic particles. That means you got to understand how subatomic particles work. That means that he understands all of these different quantum laws about how atoms and molecules work and how they fit together and what do they do and what are the weird, strange laws. And he eventually discovered that there were all these strange things about atoms and molecules. There is also like a fire exit door back here. I don't know if you guys want to jack that one open as well. But maybe I'll get more dogs coming in. I'm not really sure at this point. They'll be very happy to be here. We'll see if they have anything intelligent to say. The people are taking back the power, folks. This is where it's happening, right here. So what he found out in 1987 was that there's all these weird little things about atoms that most of us don't even know. There's laws about how the atomic nucleus fits together. So that atomic nucleus is the key. The nucleus has protons and neutrons in the normal model. But the neutrons are only put in there because they think that they should be there. Because they think that the neutrons are needed to make the math work. Oh, we're kind of getting a little bit of glare. You guys, it's too bright? Okay, why don't we close that one? We got to at least save one side. Okay, that side isn't quite as bad. All right. There's warm air anyway, he said. Okay. It's anarchy. It's chaos. All right. We're just trying to figure this thing out. Okay, so anyway, 1987, he's looking at the atoms and molecules that make up the universe. He's studying their properties. He's looking for magic numbers. He's looking at the protons inside the nucleus. And he comes up with the idea that the nucleus of the atom is not just a big ball of protons, that the protons are in shells. And that as atoms increase in their size and atomic weight, that there are shells within shells that grow. So look at this. This is his geometric solution of the atomic nucleus. Wow, this is fun, huh? I'm just loving this whole thing. Somebody just wrapped their belt around it or something. If we have some gaffer tape, we could tape it together. Does any AV guys have some tape? All right, cool. It's working. So now what am I showing you here? This is gonna trip you out. And again, most of you don't know about this yet, which is really cool. That excites me. So these are the layers of how protons appear inside the nucleus. These are protons. Now what the heck? Wait a minute. I was taught in school that a proton is a particle. No. In Dr. Robert Moon's model, the protons are just waves, and the waves are geometric. So each proton is a corner of a geometric object. So what's oxygen? Oxygen has 8 protons. So in Dr. Robert Moon's model, the oxygen is a cube sitting in the middle. The cube has 8 corners. Those are the 8 protons. So you are utterly dependent on oxygen to breathe, right? So as you inhale oxygen, you're inhaling all these little cubes. And the cube is a fractal of the image of the original photon of the universe. So your breath, the power of your breath, the shamanic spiritual energy that all these meditation practices, remember they want you to really breathe deeply? And then that's how you ascend? You're taking in sacred geometry. You're inhaling it into your lungs, and there's energy in there that's actually awakening your ascension. It's preparing you for the ascension. It's unbelievable that oxygen is the one thing that if we don't have it for even really like a blood choke to the brain, it's like 60 seconds and you're dead. Then we have, the next pattern after that is the octahedron, where you're adding now another 6 protons, and that brings you silicon. Anyway, I'm going to run you through the whole thing. It'll be easier to see if we do it one at a time. So the first element is the cube with the 8 corners. And again, this is only a vibration, and it's all a vibration of the original photon making these atoms. 8 protons, oxygen. What's the number there, the percentage? That's the total number, the total percent of Earth's mass, the total weight of the Earth that is oxygen. So 62.55% of all the matter on Earth is oxygen. That's because matter wants to do this. Matter wants to go into the cube pattern because it's the home vibration. It's what feels good. So these elements are the most useful for life because it's a biological universe. That's why we need to breathe oxygen. Then we have the octahedron, the next layer. The octahedron shows up as silicon because silicon has 14 protons. And that's 21.2% of all the mass of the universe. Yeah, so now we've had another side effect, which is that it's actually gotten a lot hotter. And apparently the cooling effect that we found was just the motion of air-conditioned air as it was leaving the building. Good God. Fuck. Whatever. They're doing it next year in May. Let's just all give a big round of applause for that brilliant insight. Who would have thunk it? Wow, if May, it's not going to be as hot. Okay. There's other reasons why it was done in June this time, so it's all good. Anyway, let's go down the list. And we get to silicon next, 21.2% of all the mass of the Earth. Well, right there, we're up to 73.7. That's a lot. And those are the 2 home vibrations that matter wants to make. And a lot of things are made out of silicon. Silicon is a very, very important element for the building of skin and cells and proteins and all that stuff. Then the next one we have is the icosahedron, which adds up to 26 corners altogether, and that's iron. And iron is weird because it is magnetic. The magnetic property of iron is why this is so interesting. So then, that's the icosahedron we see around the outside. 1.2% of the mass. It's magnetic. Nobody's been able to explain why refrigerator magnets don't fall off the refrigerator. What the heck is a permanent magnet? Why does it just keep generating energy? All you have to do is move a wire over the magnet, and it induces electrical current in the wire. That's called Lenz's law. Pretty amazing. So this could explain where magnetic energy is coming from. It's the resonance coming off of the iron molecule. The iron atom, the nucleus, is resonating, creating a magnetic field. Then we go down. We got the cube, we got the octahedron, we got the icosahedron, which is iron. Then we go down, we got the dodeca. That's the last one, and that's palladium. Now, why is palladium so interesting? Here's your dodeca again in the middle. Palladium is the magic material that they drop into heavy hydrogen, this hydrogen water, and the palladium generates heat. For some reason, it starts vibrating, and it creates all this heat that it shouldn't create. And that forms what they call cold fusion. So the whole secret to cold fusion is the palladium. Nobody knows why it works. But with Dr. Robert Moon's discoveries from 1987, before they discovered cold fusion, we now have the scientific rationale for why it works, which is that that guy, that dodeca, is resonating. The hydrogen is banging off of it, it's creating all this energy. So this explains all these really cool things. Now, is there any real practical proof that Dr. Robert Moon was right? Yes. I got all excited because IBM went down with this very advanced technology, and they were able to scan out a single molecule. They were able to see what it looks like at the molecular level. And guess what it looks like? Unfrickin' believable. You can actually see the Merkaba. You can actually see the energy flow. You can see the hexagonal geometric containment pattern. It fits together so beautifully. So what we're dealing with here is a vibration that's actually making matter fit together a certain way. Now, we also have microclusters. This is another one of these weird things that we didn't understand how it worked until this quantum science comes along. This is 459 gold atoms on the left and 561 gold atoms on the right. What they were doing in these microcluster studies is they shoot atoms out of a gun, one at a time. The atoms then bundle together in certain patterns. But they always make certain magical shapes, which are geometric. They preferentially do this. They prefer to form geometry. Now, science has no explanation for this. But this is a map now of the actual different patterns that the geometry takes when you have a cluster of about 460 gold atoms hanging out. So it doesn't stay the same shape. It's constantly kind of moving because, remember, it's in a sea of energy. And there's waves in the ocean. There's waves in the sea. So as those waves move through, you notice that the shape is changing, but that the underlying geometry is always there. And that's actual real scanning electron microscope photographs. So this is all fine and good for dead matter. As in our conventional scientific view, we say, oh, the matter is dead. It's not really alive, right? So water would be following this. But what about living material? What about DNA? Well, DNA also has geometry in how those molecules fit together remarkably well. First of all, you get these hexagon-shaped chains and you get these pentagon-shaped chains. Nobody really understands why that's happening. Sacred geometry, the vibration of the original photon, the light that created the universe, the same mathematical patterns are in your DNA. She's writing everything down as I go. She's all excited about it. The rest of us are like, wow, I don't know about the heat in here. We're just trying to figure this thing out. Okay, so this guy, Dr. Mark White, looked at the DNA and figured out how the structure actually fits together. And I saw this diagram, I didn't really get it. I saw this diagram, I didn't really get it. But what you're supposed to be seeing is the dodecahedron, which is there on the left. And his discovery was that the double helix actually wraps around the geometry, meaning that the geometry ultimately is attracting those molecules that make DNA. The geometry is all there is. Well, that didn't do me any good until I saw this. This is a diagram that shows you a stack of dodecahedrons like a totem pole, and then you take the actual double helix of the DNA. It's like you got those old-fashioned pipe cleaners that you used to make little toys out of, right? Well, I'm from the 70s. I mean, it was cool back then. Trust me, if you're like freaking texting on your phone, millennial, you don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Anyway, you wrap the pipe cleaners around your little totem pole of dodecs, and the exact phase angle of the double helix is where the geometry tells those molecules to go. So the only thing that's really here is this vibration, this stack of dodecahedrons vibration, which are part of a larger structure. So the larger structure is also geometric, but these are the fractals. These are the tinier fractals. And remember, if you go inside here and you look at the deeper layers of vibration, all the other shapes will fit in there. The shapes of the other atoms and molecules. Remember, they're all interconnected, right? So this is like a geometric gravitational vortex. It's pulling, it's pulling gravitational energies pulling in. Well, what did I just say at the beginning of the talk happens to light when it's around DNA? It gets gravitationally sucked in. Is this starting to make sense to you now? Are you starting to get this thing? It's the same gravity. Honestly. That gives me a water break. I'm just going to take a water break here. It's the same gravitational force, a geometric gravitational force that pushes those atoms together when they're shot out one at a time and making those microclusters that I just showed you. It's the same gravitational force that's actually cohering matter into these protons in the nucleus that are geometric, like the oxygen, which is the cube, the silicon, et cetera, et cetera. It's the same stuff, the same forces that are holding galaxies together into supergalaxies and are taking galactic arms and making them geometric. Same force, this gravitational attraction in a geometric pattern, pulls all the atoms together and arranges them into DNA. So this is how DNA is formed out of non-living material. This is why the universe will make life wherever water is found. So then we advance forward to a very, very significant discovery, which is that watery planets are all over the frickin' universe. And this is a major, major part of my new book. The universe is teeming with Earth-like planets. We discovered this in 2013. This is Drake, and the Drake equation is what all the people hired by the television shows that are supposed to debunk UFOs. He made this calculation, which you see on this chalkboard behind him, in which he said, well, there's only 2.25 civilizations in the galaxy. Well, what the heck is a 0.25 civilization? But everybody thought, oh, man, he did it. He scientifically proved there's no life in the universe. Well, NASA's changed its tune, and I first found out about it in this article, the Fermi Paradox, quoting from this scientific paper, which actually tells us now the full implications of it are that there could be as many as 40 billion Earth-like planets just in our galaxy. 40 billion. If we took every person on Earth and gave them a ship that could go to anywhere in the galaxy and said, go look for planets that we could live on, dude. And if you have 7 billion people on Earth, and they're all adults now, you'd need, like, each person would have to go to 6 different Earth-like planets to even see them all. It's just, What do you do with that kind of stuff? So when we see this awesome percentage of Earth-like planets here, I just was pointing your attention now to the bottom. It says they surveyed 42,000 sun-like stars for the dimmings that occur when a planet crosses in front. We found 603 planets, 10 of which are Earth-size and orbit in the habitable zone. That means that there's a total of 22% of sun-like stars orbiting that have Earth-sized planets around them. The nearest planet may be only 12 light years away. So now think about all the laws that I've been telling you, and think about how, whoops, I wanted to go back to that for a minute. Think about all the science that I've showed you and how these geometric laws are not intrinsic to the Earth. They're intrinsic to the universe. There's a universal geometry that made everything, the original photon. If those guys are right, and I absolutely believe they are, then that's all there is. That means that you are the photon. This validates the ancient esoteric teachings that tell us that the universe is an alive, conscious being of light. That light was the original creation. In the beginning there was light, right? Or in the beginning there was the sound, the aum, and everything was made from that vibration. What we find out from all these different teachings that now appear to be given to us by extraterrestrials with advanced technology is that the light is what we are. And you have to evolve back into that. So ascension is where you meditate on that awareness. You meditate on that primordial awareness that you ultimately are, and that meditation transitions you back into your native form. So there's some other really cool stuff that I wanted to show you that now takes all this science and applies it directly to ascension and evolution. So we can prove that mass evolution is already happening, that we are already changing, we are already having these genetic rewrites that are implied by the science I said before. Kanchizen is one of the scientists who I was really into, and you've heard me talk about him if you've read my books. But I got some pictures from the Russians. I've been asking for this for years, and they finally gave them to me, some real pictures of his research. This is all we had going on at first. This diagram was kind of hard to understand, but the idea was that he built some kind of a large room that was in the shape of a dodecahedron, right? Well, that's interesting. Dodecahedron, there it is. And then each corner, each face of the dodecahedron has a funnel coming out of it, which is those triangles that are measured by number 2. The funnels then have copper pipes that route over into another room, which is number 5. And then in this astonishingly precise scientific diagram, number 4 is a duck. Well, not so precise. Now what he's doing is number 3 is a microwave generator. It's not enough to kill the duck, but it's enough to jazz up his DNA. The duck's DNA is getting jazzed up. It's creating these photons that are released by the microwaves. The photons are then getting, some of them are getting routed through the pipes into room number 5, in which you now have a pregnant chicken with eggs in her womb. Now, thank God I finally was able to get us this. You're only the second audience ever to have seen this. This is the actual illustration, an actual photograph of the scientist Kanchizen with this gigantic geodesic shape. It's not quite a dodecahedron as I'm now seeing because there's hexagons on those side faces, but it's close. And then inside there, he puts the duck in the microwave generator, and he zaps the duck, redirects the beam over into this little container over here, and he has these eggs, and he's taken the chicken out of there for a while, but the chicken is now normally going to be sitting on the eggs so they don't die, or perhaps he's just incubating them, but I think the chicken, I don't know if the chicken's in there or not, actually. It looks like the chicken is not, so maybe he just keeps them warm. So the eggs get a genetic rewrite from this DNA zapping. So what happens is their features change. So here's what a duck looks like. A duck has an elongated beak and webbing between its toes. Here's what chickens look like. The chicken has a shorter beak and is naked toes. Now, this just so happens to be an image I pulled up on Google of ducks and chickens. This is just a chicken that adopted ducks, okay? That's not what came out of the eggs. What we got was this, so-called duck hens. Now, for some reason, this guy chopped off legs from other duck hens, and stuck it above the other ones. I couldn't figure out for the longest time, why the hell are there two severed legs just hanging out above the other chicken? But then, so what he was trying to show was that chickens are not supposed to have webbing between their feet, but these duck hens actually do. And you can see it right there. So here's the findings that were discovered. He took a total of 500 different eggs. He could only do a little pile of them at each time. 500 different eggs were zapped. Of those 500 eggs, 480 of them actually hatched. That's pretty good. 80% of what came out had a flat duck-shaped head, not like a chicken. 90% had a shift in where the eye was located on the face, more to where a duck would be, and 25% had webbing appear between the toes. So notice on the duck's head that the eye is high and far back on the skull, and that there's an elongated beak and webbing. And the chicken's eye is kind of in the middle of the skull, and it has a short beak and no webbing. So this is a total transformation into these little guys. And then now, more recently, I found this picture of which he pickled one of the ducks. Now, here's the really cool thing. I got a message, and I don't know what to do with this yet. I'm just going to be honest with you. I got a message from a Russian colleague. I'm not going to say his name, just for security. But he writes me a lot of stuff. And I'm in the process of buying some technology from these guys. In fact, I already paid for it. Now I got to pay for shipping, and I haven't paid for the shipping yet. So I'm going to be doing that. Hopefully, I got to just write the guy back. I've just been really, really busy. Anyway, he wrote me an email yesterday and said that Conchizen is prepared to cook us up some more duck hens in his little box, and we can then DNA test their DNA. And would we sponsor that research in some way or get that research done? And I'm just saying it out to you now, so if anybody has an idea of how we could get DNA testing done on this duck DNA, well, she doesn't like animal experimentation. The point is, this stuff has given us an underlying scientific principle. I don't think the research needs to be done anymore. I don't want to do more animal testing either. We already know. I mean, look, you can see right here what was done. On a much more benevolent level, doesn't mess with animals, he took corn and wheat and mixed it together. And what do you think that's going to look like? Nobody's ever seen this. You're only the second group to ever see this. You see the kind of the shape of the ear of corn, but then it's got the little tassels of wheat coming off of it. It's a morph between the two forms. And here he is. You can see now that they have the kind of stalks that corn would have, but then they also have wheat-like seed heads on top of them. So his other discovery was that he could make rooms in the shape of eggs out of metal, and that people staying inside them, their health would dramatically increase. And this mirrors many other studies, torsion field type studies. So there he is inside the egg-shaped room, and those plants all grow much better. And, you know, considering what this guy is doing with animals and stuff, maybe he might have messed around with that dog a little bit. No, I'm just joking. But, buddy, stay away from the turkey, all right? We don't want... No more. Just let him go. And there he is with his little pickled duck hen in the jar. So if you've ever wondered what the heck is going on with a duck-billed platypus, here's my theory. A few ducks were hanging out, and there were some moles nearby. Maybe some alcohol was involved. Who the heck knows? Or maybe they just got struck by lightning. But somehow their DNA fused together. This thing doesn't make any sense. It's not a bird, but it's got a bird beak. It's a frickin' freak. This thing doesn't make any sense at all. And it's got these weird poisonous spines on its feet. It's just very bizarre. That's all proof of this. Now, Dr. Garyaev, the same scientist who I was talking to you about before, showed that you could actually transform one species completely into another with no genetic freaks whatsoever. And this is the laser that I actually have already bought. I paid $1,500 for one of these lasers that you see right here. I haven't got it mailed to me yet. But I'm going to be able to do any of these type of tests if I wanted to, and there's other things you can do with it. Like, for example, they took the DNA from the great-granddaughter of a grandmother who's lost all of her teeth. They energized that DNA with one of these lasers, and it's got a certain kind of special vibrational signature that goes on it. And when you energize that DNA with the laser, for some reason, it stimulates the people backwards in the family tree. So if you have children, you can energize their DNA, and Grandma actually regrew 4 molars in the back of her mouth. Isn't that crazy? Now, they didn't get the whole mouth, and unfortunately, Garyaev, who you see right here, was fired from his job at a mainstream Russian hospital after he did that research, because they said, that's impossible, you're crazy. So I actually was given an offer to buy one of these at half price. They're normally $3,000. I bought it for $1,500. And, you know, I don't have any children, but there's certainly ways that we could try to find people who do. And if they're missing some teeth, you know, we'll just see what happens. We'll have some fun with this thing. I don't know what else to do with it yet. I'm going to figure it out. But apparently it does lots of different healing stuff. If you have some good genetic DNA and you energize it with the laser, you can reactivate that DNA vibrationally. It's like you're rewinding the vibrational clock. And it has this very interesting healing effect. Another one of the things that he did is to take eggs that were naturally laid by a frog and then zap that laser that I just purchased through eggs laid by a salamander. The beaming into the frog eggs created a complete metamorphosis. The frog eggs that came out of a frog's body grew into salamanders and showed no evidence whatsoever of having come out of frogs. Now, yes, it's a creepy thing to be zapping lasers and doing this stuff, but the important point that I hope you don't miss is that this is exactly what is happening to us. This is part of the genetic aspect of ascension. This is the ascension process. So one of the studies that I found that shows us this was published in Mail Online, Daily Mail. This is May 31st, 2012. Nobody understands why this is happening, but in the last 150 years, the average skull of an American, studied from the mid-1800s up until 1980s, the average skull has had an increase in brain size and volume by a whole tennis ball. That's a total of 1,500 skulls that were surveyed. The faces are becoming longer and narrower. It's quite incredible. Quite incredible. This was another study that jerked my chain because it was published in June 2012. Sourcefield had already come out by this point, and I argued that DNA was a universal, just like I've argued to you here. They didn't ever mention my book. They just talked about this without ever giving credit to the source of where it came from. That's very common. These things happen all the time. But the point is, they're putting out the idea that DNA is some sort of universal wave, which I've just now proven to you in this talk. So now we have this anthropologist from University of Wisconsin, Dr. John Hawks, who's DNA testing mummies and looking at their evolutionary rate, which he calls positive selection. And in these studies, he found that human evolution has sped up 100 times faster in the last 5,000 years. So whatever we are doing in our part of the galaxy, it appears that we're moving into some new energy that's actually jacking up our DNA and changing it into something else, just like these genetic tests prove that can be done. The last 40,000 years have been a time of supercharged evolutionary change. And his ultimate discovery was that if you DNA test Neanderthal DNA and compare it to somebody from 5,000 years ago, The DNA of the Neanderthal is closer to that DNA from 3000 BC than it is to us. To put it in a simple language, our DNA has evolved by 7%. It's changed by 7% in the last 5,000 years. That's a gigantic amount of change. Totally unprecedented. So here is one study, one newspaper publication that shows this evolution taking place from the Daily Galaxy. Here's another one from the BBC. Human evolution is speeding up. And we have the Flynn effect that's showing that our IQ is going up. So there's an average increase of 3 IQ points per decade for over 100 years. Over 20 different countries, it's all doing the same thing. This is unbelievable. The increase is most striking for the tests that measure our ability to recognize abstract, nonverbal patterns. That means it's not about literacy. It's not about reading magazines and newspapers. It's about symbolic, creative, intuition thinking. How do you explain all this stuff? The skull is getting larger. The DNA is changed by 7%. The IQ is going up. It shows that we are evolving. And that genetic model, that idea that you can zap the salamander energy into frog eggs and transform them into salamanders, actually shows up in the fossil record as well. Let's look at this. This is an actual diagram built by 2 scientists, Dr. James Raup and Dr. David Sepkoski. This is from the most exhaustive collection of fossil data ever found and put together. 3,300 different genres of life in the oceans, going all the way back, as you can see on the bottom right, 250 million years ago. Now, what are we actually looking at here? The height of the graph is how many new species appear on Earth that we've never seen before. The height of the graph is new species. What we're seeing is that there are regular spikes in which sudden bursts of evolution happen across the entire planet. A massive number of species completely evolve into something new, and it's happening in a regular cycle that they estimated to be somewhere between 25 to 26 million years. Now, more recently, we have Robert Rode from UC Berkeley, who took the whole graph even further back to 542 million years ago and found a bigger cycle, a cycle of 62 million years. And you can see that it kind of breaks down once you get to this point, which was the 250 million year mark, where the other one started. It still works a little bit, but there's a new cycle that's starting to kick in there. So what's going on here? Well, what I did is I actually built this diagram where I combined the two together, showing that first it's on one cycle, and then it upshifts to another one. Well, this was one of my greatest scientific achievements. One of the things that just blew me away. As I was looking at this diagram, I'm meditating on this, I'm thinking, okay, let's look at the units of time. 62 million years, okay? There's 4 of them. What's 4 times 62? 248. What is the estimated orbit of our galaxy in millions of years? 250 million years. Only 2 million years off from this. Then we got the 26, which is really closer to 25, and there's 10 of them. And lo and behold, this is what I realized. So if you can't understand all the nuts and bolts and the numbers, check this out. Remember that I showed you this is the big payoff, folks. If you're falling asleep from heat stroke, because it's fucking hot in here. Okay? I'm up there on the stage. You got to remember, I'm like about to freaking pass out. I think I'm doing really well under the circumstances. Thank you. And remember, I'm wearing a dress shirt. I'm not even wearing my normal linen. Oh, take it off. Yeah, that's great. That ain't going to happen. Remember I said before, this is so exciting to me, that there's geometric energy that's bending galactic arms in straight lines. And what I'm now proposing to you is that that geometry is sitting there in one place, and as the galaxy spins, it's actually moving through the geometry as the geometry sits still. So just imagine the geometry is sitting there, it doesn't move, and then as the stars go through it, they are being bent by the geometry. So they're going to make a turn that's like a 60-degree turn. They're going to go this way, and then and they go off that way because the gravitational current directs them that way. What happens when they hit one of the nodes, one of the corners of the geometry? What happens to the life on the planets of the stars in those galaxies, based on or the stars in that galaxy? Well, that's the diagram that we were just looking at. These are the corners of the geometry, folks. So as we hit those geometric points, they are information dense. They have information that rewrites all the DNA of all the species on Earth, which we already now know is happening because our DNA has changed by 7% in the last 5,000 years. And we're also seeing that, in fact, there is a volume of a tennis ball size that our heads have expanded by. Well, what about these people with the elongated skulls? If you were at the panel last night, Brian Forster was there, remember that? And we're talking about these people with these freaking huge skulls, like twice as big as ours in the back. Those are people that were more evolved than we are. Okay, so as we move through this geometry, it's coming up here again, we're hitting those points. Now, here's how it works. The first 4 cycles are the 4 corners of the octahedron. So now imagine that we're moving along, the star hits that corner, the galaxy rotates in 248 million years, which means it's one circle for 248. So 62 million years between this point and this point, just by dividing 248 by 4. That's how long it takes to go from point A to point B. So your star is drifting along. It hits this corner, and that's where the fractal is. That's where all the geometry is nested together. That geometry is the code that rewrites your DNA. Then these bubbles are also expanding away from the center. That's the next important thing. Galaxies are evolving. These are like the chakras of the galaxy, and they expand. The galaxy is going through a life cycle. Eventually, it widens out and becomes a ring galaxy, and it pushes all the stars out to the edge. And then at that point, it actually implodes on itself, and that's when the galaxy is complete and everyone inside the galaxy has ascended. That's how this actually seems to be working. So that's a lot to take in, huh? It's like, see, this shit, it's like easy for me. Y'all are like, say what? I'll try it again. Let's say that one more time. So imagine now that these geometries are inside bubbles, okay? So the octahedron is one, and then the icosahedron is in another bubble. What's that? Oh, put some cold water. Thanks, bro. That way the speaker doesn't pass out. But it's interesting, you know, the psychedelic experience of having so much heat. It's like a sweat lodge. The Wilcox Sweat Lodge. Okay. So bubbles expanding. So that octahedron is getting larger and larger and larger. But the stars don't move. The stars are just going around in circles. Ultimately, they're going to get pushed away once it all expands, but that takes a long time. This is just how the remote viewing and the scientific deductions that I've come up with explain this. And I actually made this diagram in order to illustrate it because no such diagram existed. So these bubbles are expanding away from the center, so we are moving through, we first move through the octahedron. We go through one cycle of the galaxy. We hit all 4 corners. Oh, I thank you.
Passing on the torch.
Okay, this is going to saturate me completely, but hey, it's awesome. Thank you. All right, so the bubbles here are expanding, and then look at the icosahedron, and remember that there are 12 corners on the icosahedron. So we have the top and bottom, 1 and 2, and then we have a total of 1 pentagon on the top and 1 pentagon on the bottom, which you can actually see. So here's the 1 pentagon on the top, and here's the 1 pentagon on the bottom, right? So there's 5 up here and 5 down here. Now these form currents that exert force in a north-south direction because these are controlled by magnetic fields. The magnetic fields have field lines similar to what you see if you put iron filings on a piece of paper and you hold a magnet underneath it. Those are called lines of force or field lines. Awesome. Now I got cold water in there. I'm up in my game here, thanks to y'all's help. Awesome. And I let my southern accent come out just there. You notice that? That's when you know it's really freaking hot. I grew up in New York, and I only lived in the South for 8 years, but every now and then it just pokes out. Okay, so magnetic lines of force, as we go along through the ecliptic plane, we're crossing over these ley lines, these magnetic ley lines, and they carry the information vibration, the code, from those points. So this is why, once again, we didn't want that yet. This is why, once again, let's go back to the one that doesn't have the starburst in it. We see here these lines where it says 26 million year, that should actually be 25. Those lines represent the points of the geometry. Each of those corners of that icosahedron creates a magnetic field line. It's a wall that we hit as the galaxy is rotating. The 62 million year cycle is a lot easier to see because you got 1, 2, 3, 4 lines that we hit before that shape expands away and is no longer the main one influencing it. But the point is, those lines, each line represents one of those geometric node points, and it has conscious, living, divine information in it. Divine information that creates ascension. Now think about, again, the sheer number of habitable watery Earths that would be in a given galaxy. We now know it's 40 billion, right? Do you think that this system only is working on Earth? No. Every single star in that galaxy is moving through that geometry, causing the arms to bend in straight lines, as I showed you in those pictures. And when you hit the corner, when you then make a 60-degree or 90-degree turn like you do here, you're going through this information-dense area that reprograms your DNA. So the universe itself is designed to create an inevitable ascension mechanism. You have to keep moving through if you're going to stay on that planet, and if you don't stay on the planet and you haven't gotten ready to ascend yet, you have to go somewhere else. So this now is the whole scientific background for what the real goal of the talk was, is to talk about the preparation for ascension. So I want to talk to you about this concept of the DNA evolving, the consciousness evolving. Our minds are becoming more evolved, our enlightenment is increasing, and there's yet all this stress on the earth at this time. Now we're looking at a new model of the cosmos in which geometry is fractalizing, kind of like this really cool illustration I found online. Downloaded that off of pond5.com. That's really a nice kind, it's not exactly precise. It's based on I now know it's based on an Adobe After Effects plugin called Plexus. And I could probably reconstruct this if I spent enough time, but I haven't done it yet. I know how they did it. But anyway, the point is, this is a really cool kind of dancing geometry version. It's like a visual mandala that we can meditate on, giving us an idea of how the universe is creating itself out of this geometry. And think about the idea that this geometry is all fractals of the original photon, and that is ultimately what is going on inside your cells. Your cells, your DNA, is a geometric pattern that absorbs photons. And there's new photons coming in. That's what all these esoteric teachings are telling us, that there's new photons that have new codes in them that change our DNA. Well, I just proved to you that that really works, because I showed you how it works on the galactic level, that we move through this geometry and we hit new node points. Well, Walter Cruttenden on my panel with the binary star, how many people saw the binary star panel? Raise your hand. Okay, not as many. We now know that our solar system is orbiting another star called the Black Sun. It seems to be a brown dwarf. And as we move through that star, we're moving through geometry, just like what I showed you on the galactic level. So that geometry actually is causing the same thing to happen. And when we reach the end of the cycle, we hit this wall of energy that activates DNA. Except now it's happening from a star and not on a galactic level. So this ascension process does involve some very interesting things, because not everybody gets what they're supposed to learn. This is not universal ascension. The ancient teachings, including the Tibetans, think about how many people actually ascended in the rainbow body practices. There's 160,000 documented who did it. Now that's a lot, but it's a very small percentage compared to the total number of people on Earth. So you don't get a full graduation. You don't get everybody ascending. You have to prepare for ascension. So as I said here, one of the main things I want to do in this talk, first of all, is to break down the mental conditioning and show you what I believe now is the actual fractal holographic model of the cosmos, in which this original photon creates geometry that expands out into the whole universe, and the geometry is alive and intelligent. And as you move through new areas of it, it changes your DNA structure, rewrites the code by an intelligent blueprint. Well, one of the things that happens is we have this law of free will, and all these ancient teachings say that free will is preserved, that there's karma, okay? That means that there are people on Earth, these global elites, who are killing off billions of people, who are weaponizing our food supply, who are controlling the media, controlling the financial system, dropping nuclear bombs, doing horrible things. And if you are a person who wants to see those people die and who actually causes that to happen, how does the universe balance your karma? How do you pay off that karma? Apparently, these cycles, like the one we're now going through, end in catastrophe, but only if you're on that timeline. This becomes a really essential point, okay? I want you to, all the stuff that I've said is to break down the conditioning, to show you the idea that science is way freaking off. And that when you fix the science, we now have the proof, or at least a compelling suggestion, that the very basic nature of matter and energy itself could suddenly change. Life on Earth, I believe, is not going to stay the same. Everybody says, David, when's it going to happen? What did the insiders tell you? Well, first of all, I thought it was 2012 because all the science, the math looked good. With the Mayan calendar end date, nothing happened. But Corey Goode comes along, and with his people in the space program, they told him that this event was going to take place between 2018 and 2023. Now, what am I talking about, event? It appears that when our sun hits that geometry, when it hits that geometric corner, that because there's so much more energy in the node is really concentrated, it's got a high vibration, that the sun gives off this big blast of light and energy. And many, many ancient cultures teach this, and I don't have enough time in today's talk. Now that works. Yeah, we're getting some, I'm feeling a nice cross breeze now. It's finally cooling off outside. That's awesome. So, this new energy that's coming in, see, I'm getting telepathically influenced by this new energy of air. Wow. See, this is like it's channeling, right? So there's all different stuff coming in at once, including that I respond to my own environment as I'm talking. So, but it all fits. This breeze of new energy coming in from the sun goes whoosh, gives off this big flash. The Hindus called it the Samavartika fire at the end of an age, and they said it was rainbow-colored light that the sun gives off, not just white light. Rainbow-colored light, a big flash, just like I showed you. That photon at the beginning of the universe goes psh, and the dust that was left behind at the far reaches of the galaxy still has the original geometric pattern of the octahedron in it. So the sun does this, and apparently what happens is that those who need to experience the catastrophe do. Everyone else, is either moved to another planet where everything stays the same and they're still in the third dimension, or if they've actually ascended, they get to stay with the Earth as it moves to another frequency, a new level of energy in which matter is at a different level that is not affected by this change. So, this is now a quote from the Law of One material, and I'm going to bring you through some of this stuff because this is some things that I've very rarely used in front of audiences. I didn't really want to talk about the idea of the Earth changes before. Actually, in part of it was because of how the Law of One answered the original question in the first session, question 9. The changes are very, very trivial. Then they go on to say, we do not concern ourselves with the conditions which bring about harvest. And harvest is their term for this energetic change. Now, what happens in harvest? You pull out the good crops, and then you till the soil. The soil is broken up, and it's overturned. So they're actually saying that the earth is overturned, that the soil on the surface of the earth is overturned. And in my new book, Ascension Mysteries, I finally come out with all this stuff. And I quote from the Bible, where there's a quote from Jesus where he says, "Not one stone that is standing here today will remain standing when this happens." And he talks about this flash, the light shining from the east unto the west. He said that if you are out on top of a roof, that you're not even going to have enough time to go down inside the house. Just stay on the roof when this thing starts to happen because you're not going to have enough time. In the Zoroastrian tradition, they call it frashokareti. And it is an energetic change that involves a release of energy from the sun. And they say that the wicked are burned by the energy, but that the just are transformed into something new, and that's extremely blissful and amazing. Now, here's another really weird thing. Again, I didn't want to focus on earth changes before, but it's important to mention this. Session 10, question 15, he's asking about the civilizations of Atlantis and Lemuria. The answer is the civilizations of Atlantis and Lemuria were not one, but two. And Lemuria they call Mu. Let us first look at Mu. They were beings of a somewhat primitive nature, but those who had very advanced spiritual distortions. The civilization was part of this cycle experienced at approximately 53,000 of your years ago. This is where the sinking started. Actually, that's where the origins of the sinking started, as they say in another place. Lemuria was a helpful and harmless place washed beneath the ocean during a readjustment of your sphere's tectonic plates through no action of their own. Now, if you understand, all you guys have told me that you've read most of you, almost all of you, said you read my books, you watched my show, at least to some degree. So you know how much I've validated this Law of One stuff. Hundreds of scientific data points. In fact, so much of the science that I gave you in this talk is right out of the Law of One. I just had to find the data to match it in the real world. So now, if I've validated the Law of One this much, why would they be wrong about this? This idea that there was a geological change. So they washed beneath the ocean, and then those who survived reached many places you call Russia, North America, and South America. The Indians, of whom you have come to feel some sympathy in your social complex, this is before the term Native Americans came up, are the descendants of these entities. Very interesting. Just to quickly refresh my mind, how many years ago did Lemuria suffer its catastrophe? 50,000 years ago. The origins being approximately 53,000 of your years ago. So this again is describing how this whole thing came into being. So the Law of One makes it really difficult to actually figure out what the heck is going on. The damage being completed in the last small cycle of the first master cycle, and elsewhere they explain what those cycles are. Those who escaped the destruction of Lemuria by natural catastrophe and were of Lemurian background continued their learned teachings. And that's interesting. They always talk about how as you're learning, you're teaching, and as you're teaching, you're learning. And I learn every time I do this stuff. I keep tightening up my game, getting better at it. At locations ranging from your South America onward through the Americas as you know them. and continuing over what was at that time a land bridge that no longer exists, which most of us already know that. Did the ending of this first major cycle have something to do with Lemuria being destroyed, or did it just happen to occur? Now, this is probably the most important clue that the Law of One ever gave us, the answer. Check this out. It says, there is a confluence of energies at the ending of a major cycle. It's where you get into that geometry. It's where all those geometric frequencies cause the sun to go whoosh, which a lot of ancient teachings describe, and it's from these same beings that gave it to us. This encouraged what was already an inevitable adjustment in the movement of the surfaces of your planetary sphere. Whoa! What did they say in session 1.9? The changes are very, very trivial. We do not concern ourselves. Dude, an inevitable adjustment in the movement of the surface of the sphere? What happens if the surface of the sphere moves that much? And they're calling it harvest, which is, what do you do in harvest? You break up the land and you turn it upside down. But we now know, and this is actually highly classified, but not only are there supervolcanoes on the surface of the earth, there's even bigger and nastier ones all along the oceanic fault lines. And the only thing that's stopping them from going off is the pressure of the water. When they go off, they blast rocks up into the air, and the rocks cover everything in what could ultimately, in some cases, be hundreds of feet of rock. So I had insiders tell me that you can dig down inside the earth and go, and the older they get, the farther down they go. You go down underground, and you find civilizations that used to be on the surface, but they've gotten buried by these supervolcano eruptions that create all these rocks that shoot up into the air and fall back down and pile up on us. And I've had very, very disturbing dreams where I get to see it from the perspective of the people whose karma invited that disaster, which is not any of us. Okay, just to be clear, you're not going to have to physically go through this. But some people who have invited it and authorized it will. And because I've known this all this time, and we're getting this close to it, I feel like I got to talk to you about this. Wouldn't you rather know this stuff than me just lie to you and not tell you what I know? Right? Okay, thank you. I got, if it's going to happen in 2017, which was what my first major insider told me, he said, you've been talking 2012, 2012. He said this in 2009. What you think is 2012 is actually 2017. You're right, you're just off by 5 years. Then I had another guy independently, Corey Good, show up, had no idea what this other guy said, and he said 2018. They're only off by 1 year. Is that a coincidence? I don't think so. And then other insiders have also said the period of 2018 to 2023. So there's a 5-year window. But Corey's data also was that the 5-year window is a transitional period that begins at 2017. And there may also be a series of flashes from the sun, not just one. And those flashes actually activate and enhance our DNA. An inevitable adjustment. Now, in session 2, they get into this weird thing. This is another, you got to really dig for this stuff. It's not easy to find. They're talking about how they need to have a Bible, an incense stick, and a chalice of water at Carla's head while she's doing the channeling. The incense stick has to be aligned with north, or so they say. But then they say the proper alignment is the head, her head, as she lies there, pointing 20 degrees north by northeast, not to magnetic north. Well, what the heck is that going on? This is the direction from which the newer or new age distortions of love light, which are less distorted, are emanating from. And this instrument will find comfort therein. What the heck is that saying? That's saying, they're telling you in their kind of funny little way, you're going to have a pole shift, 20-degree pole shift. And they say it again much more directly. Look at this. Previously, you stated that one of the base sides should be aligned with magnetic north. Which is better, to align it with magnetic north or 20 degrees east of magnetic north? They say this is at your discretion. The proper alignment for you of this sphere at this time is magnetic north, but then they go on. Check this out. Right now it's magnetic north, but you asked about a structure that's been used by entities whose energy vortices are more constant with true color green. Now they talk about how when we go through this process that the green ray, this new energy wave that's green ray photons, the fourth chakra, the heart chakra, love, the planet, remember Gordon Asher Davidson was saying we're going to be engulfed in love? Well, that's what's going to happen. It's the green ray photons. Nothing that is unloving will be allowed to survive on Earth anymore. Let's have it. I can't wait. So the true color green north is 20 degrees east of north, because that's the alignment the Earth is going to be in once we go through this. A 20-degree pole shift is bad for beagles and begonias, right? Unless they warp out, which is what happens. They have these gigantic ships, these motherships, that make sure that everything is preserved. There are advantages to each orientation. The effect is stronger at magnetic north and can be felt more clearly. We did watch, we pulled up when Corey was hanging out with me a few days ago, footage from the Fukushima tsunami. If you've ever seen this, go look it up. What appears to be angels moving around and portaling people out as the waves are coming through. It's very weird, interesting stuff. So it's possible that that is an example. In the Law of One, they say that when Nagasaki, Hiroshima happened, that they pulled everybody out before they got hit. Because if you get hit with a nuclear explosion, it's multidimensional and it actually destroys your soul. And they can't allow that to happen, so they have to pull you out first. So I believe that when you look at Corey and when you look at what he claims has happened to him, that he's getting pulled out and he's getting brought up into this higher plane of existence. If the blue avians do it, it's a purple or blue orb that shows up, goes up to his chest and engulfs him, and they pull him out with that. If it's the people in the inner earth, he gets this white flash of light, and all of a sudden he's down inside the earth talking to the priestess Kari or some of these other people called the Anshar that are down there. And we've talked about this throughout the weekend. I'm not going to try to recover all that data right now. The point is, both the Anshar and the blue avians have a technology. If Corey is telling the truth, and I totally believe he is, I've had plenty of personal experiences that validate it for me. If Corey is telling the truth, then both sets of beings, the blue avians and the Anshar, have a technology that can portal people out practically instantaneously. So why wouldn't they have enough personnel and enough staff and enough technology to do a whole bunch of people all at once right when it mattered at the very, very last moment? If they can do it fast enough to pull people out before the nuclear wave hits them, they can slow time down to a crawl. They can get it right down to the minutest little interval. And Corey has also said that these ETs do have a cosmic rescue plan that they enact every time these solar events take place. It's part of the cycle. So I really, again, you guys are all dedicated scholars of this, and I really appreciate you coming out here and supporting this conference and supporting my work by being here. It's totally awesome to be on the stage telling you this stuff. Thank you. I feel really blessed. Do I have any competition? Is there anybody else doing stuff like this? No. This is it. I mean, nobody else has put all this together like this. That may be why the Blue Avians are working with Corey, because Corey starts working with me, and it's a team. And I understood what they said in the Law of One more than anybody else had up until then. So you got to really dig in the Law of One, but they do tell you that this is going to happen. So if you have even a modicum of belief that this might be real, then it's really worth studying it and paying attention. Now look at this. Although the energy is weak, it is coming from the now distant but soon to be paramount direction for your planet. 20 degrees east of north. That means it's going to be a new axis. You see how dodgy the wording is? Like, you could easily gloss over that if you're tired or suffering from the kind of heat in this room. At least I got my pack now, this thing. It's making my shirt all soaking wet, but I don't care. The new paramount direction, pole shift, harvest, earth change. Now he comes right out. He can't handle the teasing anymore, right? He's got, okay, I gotta frickin' know. I can't handle it anymore. Frickin' tell me, dude, when the planetary axis realigns, is it gonna go 20 degrees east of north to conform to this new green ray vibration? There is every indication that this will occur. Now, what did they say about Lemuria? This change, there is a confluence of energies at the end of a cycle, and this encouraged what was already an inevitable movement of the surfaces of your planet. You see this? And I had a hard time when I read the Law of One originally back in 96. Like, wow, they're saying there's going to be a pole shift. How does that fit in? And it took years to figure out that the people with the bad karma go through the actual disaster, but everybody else is portaled out. They don't have to experience it. And that, as cosmic and crazy as this sounds, it all makes sense. Because each new civilization, when it restarts, all the high technology, all the ruins of the ancient civilization is buried. You can't find it unless you have the technology to really, really dig down. So it wipes the slate clean. You don't have a bunch of, oh, show me the pottery from Atlantis. Well, dude, if you dig down far enough, you'll find it, but it all got buried. That's the will of the Creator. This is a design that's used all over the universe. It buries the old civilization, so even if it was very advanced, the new people are not going to find it until they get the ability to drill down deeply and make mine shafts and go down and explore these cities. And as Corey had said, there's some 2,500 different cities underneath the surface of the earth, many of which were above ground at one time and are now buried. So that's how this works. And all this stuff I've only understood really in the last couple of years. We cannot speak of certainties, but are aware that the grosser or less dense materials, that's all the matter on Earth, will be pulled into conformation with the denser and lighter energies, which give your logos, that's the galactic cosmic sun, the sun itself is conscious, the dense materials will be pulled in with the lighter materials that give your sun its proceedings through the realms of experience. This is the really dodgy wording in the Law of One. That's why it's often been said, you know, good luck trying to read the Law of One material. Well, for some reason, I got into it. You get into a vibe with it. I would sometimes spend 45 minutes with the pages open, never even turning the page. Now, this is really, really important, too, because they talk about how certain negative entities become negative enough that they can make it into 4D negative. Other entities are positive, and they graduate into 4D or the higher dimensions positive. Everybody else has to move to another planet. That's called the three-way split. And I believe we have that quote coming up. So then he's saying, wait a minute, okay, is there one kind of a harvest where the service to self or negative people go and that's all that happens? Or is there one, where both happen at the same time? And they answer, there is only one. So this explains why there is an earth change and there is a jubilant ascension at the same time. There's only one harvest. Both things happen simultaneously. If you got bad karma and you need to go through a disaster, you're going to get to see it. I've had plenty of dreams. I've had probably 25 different dreams where I am inside a building and I feel or something like that, inside a building, and I feel the entire building literally pitch and roll and turn 9 degrees, and I'm feeling it plunge. It scares the crap out of me. I wake up, all right, I've had other dreams, including ones where I'm at my house, and I'm seeing massive, massive tsunamis coming in, and I know this is the ascension, and I'm just, yeah! As the water's about to hit me, freaking wipe me out. There was even one dream, I swear to God, where I had a surfboard and I surfed on top of the tsunami. I've had so many volcano dreams. I had this crazy dream one time, just one example of many, where Stonehenge was right outside my house. And these UFOs show up around Stonehenge, and they represented the 4 beasts of the apocalypse. There was the man, the eagle, the lion, I forget what the other one is. But these astrological images are in the sky, burning in the sky. There's beams going down into Stonehenge, and Stonehenge is going like this. There's this freaking vortex in there. And I am in the house with the people I was living with at the time, and I'm saying, we need to run over there right now. This is it. This is the ascension. We need to get to that vortex. And the ground is going like this, and literally the house splits in half, and there's freaking lava coming up. And I'm like, I don't know if we're going to make it to that vortex in time. So I've had enough of these dreams now over years and years and years that the beings obviously were telling me, we want you to teach this. Well, it's kind of fear porn. I mean, it's like, I'm not out here wanting to tell you, yeah, the earth is going to go through this, but yet it's what the directive is. It's what the orders are, if you will. And so I had to, it took me years of kind of knowing that all this stuff was going on, and I talked to insiders about it, but I didn't want to go public with it, and I'm like, earth changes are so, it's just a bummer, man. You know, and the problem is, right, people will look at this stuff, and then they'll just focus on the disaster, but then they don't have the greater context of beliefs to support the positive aspect of where this takes us. Oh, man, David said there's going to be tsunamis. That's it, we're all gone. No. We're already evolving. Our DNA is already changing, and there's also events like the Tibetan rainbow body activation, where these guys meditate on primordial empty awareness. They turn into light. So you see, I am preparing you for this process. This talk is called Preparing for Ascension. And I'm preparing your mind with the thought forms that you need. This is really the crown jewel. You guys are all students of my work. Almost everybody raise your hand. You've been watching the show. You've been reading the books. Did I ever really put it all together like this before? No. Because now is the time. You need to hear this. Okay? Oh, they're gone, dude. They're toast. Crispy critters, hash browns. No, look, everybody gets where they need to go, okay? Nobody is going through the disaster unless they have authorized it. And very, very few people will ever see the negative changes. I just did the mouth smack. Getting tired. Yeah, more water. That'll help. The animals are fine. Noah's Ark is a spaceship, and they have these gigantic motherships, and they pull out anything that's innocent so it doesn't go through this. They have enough technology to get every single thing. Dog's fine. Unless he pees on my leg, in which case I'm not going to be too happy. Or humps my leg, which is even worse. Then as we enter, this is the three-way split. Look at this. Then as we enter the fourth density, there will be a split. Part of the individuals will go into fourth density, will go to planets or places where there is service to others, and the other part will go where there is service to self. Is this correct? And the answer is yes. So both things happen at the same time. The negative harmony, 6629. The negative harvest is one of intense disharmony. And the planet will express this. That's the earth change. That's the pole shift. It's very, very, very upsetting because the people who earn that karma need to go through that. But remember, they said there's only one harvest. So both things happen at the same time. The vibrations from third to fourth density change on a negatively oriented planet precisely as they do on a positively oriented planet. People get where they need to go. There's only one harvest. With fourth density negative also comes many abilities and possibilities of which you're familiar. So they develop telepathic ability, telekinesis, that kind of stuff does happen to them, even though they're negative. And that's the problem that we have with the Draco. The Draco are fourth density. Fourth density negative. The fourth density is more dense, and it is far more difficult to hide the true vibrations of your mind-body-spirit complex, which is your body, mind, and spirit. This enables fourth density negatives like the Draco to form social memory complexes, which is their confederation, this Draco Alliance, or what they call in the Law of One the Orion Group, to form social memory complexes, as well as positives. It enables negatively oriented entities the opportunity for a different set of parameters in which they can show their power over others and can be of service to self. Now look at this. Well, they say the conditions are the same as far as vibrations are concerned. This is the next one. As fourth density occurs, there is a new planet and a new physical vehicle, a body, that gradually expresses itself. And the parameters of bellicose, that means evil actions, become those of thought rather than manifested weapons. Whoa. So one of the things that I'm telling you right now is that you are probably going to be part of this planetary defense force as we go through this change. If you guys are early ascenders, and I hope you are, because I'm trying to prepare you for that, then there is going to be battles that have to be fought to clean out the last of the negative entities from the earth. But we're going to be doing it with ascended powers. So, like, if you can imagine some of the greatest movie scenes that you've witnessed, where people are using telekinesis and they're levitating huge objects and there's beams of light, that's the kind of stuff we're talking about. It's a new... So the negative does this as well as the positive. It's a thought battle, because we're now operating in an ascended capacity where we have all the abilities like Jesus. So a whole new planet and a whole new body. Now, at the present, we have in third density those 3D entities who have been here for some number of incarnations who will graduate in the three-way split. Now, he's referring to something they'd already said before, so that's not new. This is either positive remaining for 4D on Earth, negative going to another planet, and the rest of the people who are still 3D going to another 3D planet. So he's summarizing what they said. In addition to these entities, I'm assuming we have some who are harvested from other 3D planets who've come here and incarnated in third density to make the transition with the planet, plus wanderers, which are angelic souls. So then he's saying, okay, is this correct? Is there a three-way split, and are there angelic souls here? And they say, this is correct, except we may note a small point. The positively oriented, harvested entities, meaning the people who actually ascend, will remain in this planetary influence, but not upon this plane. Whoa. What the heck does that mean? That means that the Earth has a new plane of existence, a new body that is activated, a fourth dimensional body. Now, check this out. He's kind of worried about this whole, like, the ascension component and then the Earth change component. He's like, wow, catastrophe? What's up with that? Then they say, look, it's misleading to speak of gains and losses when you're dealing with the subject of a cycle ending and the new fourth dimensional energy beginning on your planet. You don't want to think about it as things being lost. It's best to be kept in the forefront of your faculties of intelligence, and you know that means they're really serious because it's all wordy, that there is one creation in which there is no loss. So they don't want you to think that anything is lost. This is a birth. This is a transfiguration, a very positive new change. There are progressive cycles for entities to use for their own experience. And if you don't get it now, you can get it later. But as you learn all this, I think that all this will help you to take this a lot more seriously so that you realize, hey, look, whatever stuff you're going through in your life, it's all building up to some very, very significant thing. And I think I've done about as well as I can do right now in getting the word out, because our show is more popular than CNN. Thank you. So it's getting out there. The message is getting out there, which is pretty awesome. I'm probably going to have 3 New York Times bestsellers by the time this new book comes out. That's awesome, too. Nobody else has got that. Thank you. All right. Now, this is pretty wild. Check this out. As the green ray cycle, or the density of love and understanding, begins to take shape, the yellow ray plane, which means 3D Earth, which you now enjoy in your dance, because they say it's an illusion, a dance through an illusion. It's not really real, because remember, the only thing that really exists is what? The photon, the geometry, which is love, light. But yeah, you're basically correct. Let's just get a little more technical. The Earth will cease to be inhabited for some period of your space-time, as the space-time necessary for 4D entities to learn how to shield themselves from 3D has to be learned. Isn't that interesting? 4D is so similar to 3D that until they learn a meditative technique that can cloak them, they cannot be invisible. So they require an advancement in their level of ascension, their level of consciousness, to be able to hide, to be able to become invisible from 3D. So that means that the physical 3D Earth has to be cleared out. And that's because the Earth is settling down from a big catastrophe. But this other plane of existence is going to be where people are, and then everybody else goes on a mothership to another planet. Boy, this all just sounds so freaking crazy. This is my job, dude. I'm supposed to be teaching you all this stuff. I don't know why, but it's true. That's the thing. This is all actually going to happen. It's really, really bizarre. After this period, there will come a time when third density will again be able to cycle on your planet, which means everything settles down, the dust settles, this kind of, the clouds around the planet that make the equivalent of like a nuclear winter kind of thing goes away, the sun comes back, the rain starts to fall, plants start to grow, everything comes back, and then you can have people live on the Earth in 3D again. But you got to leave some time for the ascended people to be able to cloak themselves, and then they move to the inner Earth. That's what ends up happening when people go back to the surface in 3D, and that's where those ascended beings are right now that we talked about in the Inner Earth talk with Corey. And again, they're going to say this at the end, but I'll remind you, if you want to reference back any of the things that I've been telling you about, all the DVDs of every talk are here, and they're not that expensive, so you can catch all of this stuff. And it all fits together. Meanwhile, there is another sphere congruent to a great extent with yellow ray forming. The fourth density sphere coexists with first, second, and third. It is denser due to the rotational core atomic aspects of its material. So what they're saying is a new Earth, a new type of energy that actually forms. Very, very interesting. We have discussed this subject with you. The fourth density entities which incarnate at this space-time are fourth density in the view of experience, but are incarnating in less dense vehicles, that means bodies, due to desire to experience and aid the birth of fourth density upon this plane. You may have noticed that fourth density entities have a great abundance of compassion. I would like to make a point clear now that I am sure of myself. People of this planet following any religion or no religion at all, or having no intellectual knowledge of the law of one or anything at all, can still make it into fourth density if they are of a loving vibration, the 4D vibration. Is that not correct? So you don't have to be religious. And they said, yes, this is correct. So it's not, oh, the second coming of Christ, the rapture, and people fly into the air like kites. There they go. Look at them. Bye-bye. Oh, shit. Look at what's happening now. Only our cult, only our group. There's 38,830 different denominations of Christianity. Which one is rapturing? It's probably more than one, but not everybody. If your religion teaches you that you're better than other people and you're elite, then not going to make it. Okay, check this out. However, you will find few who are ready for ascension whose level of radiance does not cause others to be aware of their what you may call spirituality. Now that should really sink in. That's something I really want you to think about. If somebody is going to ascend, they will be considered, as they say right here, an unusually radiant personality. That the people who know the person who is going to ascend will say, wow, he is so spiritual. She is so spiritual. She's so wise. He's so intelligent. He's so amazing. Oh, obviously, somebody we're talking about. I don't know. I'm just kidding. There's lots of people who have a spiritual vibration. You have a spiritual vibration. That's why you're here. You're part of this change. You're part of this awakening. You're part of this unfolding process. Why is it that out of a conference with 3,000 people, the folks who really get it, number in this room, it looks like maybe about 100 out of 3,000, right? Well, the Lord will separate the sheep from the goats. It's pretty obvious to me. Every one of you who's been studying, you know you're going to get the bomb-ass talk if you go to the David Wilcock Monday night. That's where you really get the magic. It all comes together. Now, let's go on. In other words, there will be fewer negative entities going to 4D than positive. Is this correct? And they do say yes. This is correct. The great majority of your people will repeat third density. Wow. There it is. And the bottom line is, if you're going to ascend, you will be known as an unusually spiritual and radiant person. You will be a joy to the people who see you. They will look up to you. They will be inspired by you. They will feel good about you. If you want to prepare yourself for ascension, and you're a drainbow, you might want to look at that a little bit if you believe any of this crap that I'm saying. Which means you're crazy, but so am I, and we're going to be proven right anyway, so forget about it. Now, look at this. This is their kind of political wording where they say, yeah, the harvest has some inconvenience. Yeah, okay. I'll grok that. What is the position of the planet with respect to the cycles? Your planet is in 4D vibration, but its material is quite confused due to society memory complexes embedded in its consciousness. This is all these backwards religions they're talking about. It has not made an easy transition to the new vibrations which beckon, which again tilt the axis 20 degrees. Therefore, your change will be fetched with some well, inconvenience, yeah. Yeah, it's not going to be that great. But whatever. We don't care. We're not concerned. It's very, very, very trivial. Dude, freaking pole shift is not trivial, okay? It's kind of a big deal. Inverted commas. Is this inconvenience imminent within a few years? This inconvenience or disharmonious vibratory complex has begun several of your years in the past. It shall continue unabated for a period of approximately 30 of your years. Add 30 to when this was done, 1981, you get 2011. They never mentioned the Mayan calendar end date. They never mentioned the year 2012, but they were 1 year off with this approximately 30-year period, so it could be approximately 31. And they also say in another reading that after this change happens, right at that point, there's no more earth changes. The earth does its thing, and then everything settles back down, so everybody's fine. Now, look at this. After this period of 30 years, I am assuming that we have become a fourth density planet fully activated. Is this correct? Yes. Is it possible to estimate what % of our population will inhabit our new planet? It hasn't happened yet, thus estimation is meaningless. That's a very politically correct answer. But the deeper answer was the great majority of your peoples will repeat third density. And that's, our planet is very backwards, and all of you are here to help that change. That's why you know all this stuff. You're not just here to go to a conference and hear me talk. You're here to learn this because you will become the teachers of teachers. when this ascension happens, a lot of people are going to be struggling to understand what just happened to them. You don't just immediately become ascended. If you're one of the people who actually goes through this, it's the equivalent of being in a psychedelic trip, except it never stops. Wow! In fact, we already know that there are these Draco tankers that are cloaked and orbiting in low Earth orbit. This is something we heard from one of our new insiders. Not supposed to say who it is. But anyway, and Corey Good confirmed it. There's these Draco tankers that are cloaked and orbiting in our low Earth atmosphere, and they are deliberately stopping the ascension. They are holding back the energy, and they're authorized to do this. But our government right now, the secret government, has the technology to shoot these tankers down. And there's a big, big debate going on about whether they should do that or not. Because as soon as they shoot the tankers down, they can't shoot them down a little at a time. They're going to all turn off. It's going to knock the whole thing down. Immediately when that happens, we all get zapped with this fourth density energy, and everybody goes through the equivalent of an activation of consciousness. If you're a negatively oriented person, you start to freak out. Some of the negatively oriented people that have been zapped with this energy in laboratories by this secret space program, they start to freak out, they start to scream, they start to try to create violence. But the people who are of a positive orientation, they bliss out, they meditate, they have very positive experiences happen to them. So that's the difference. So I don't know about you, but I say, look, if you throw up, you'll feel better. Shoot the fucking tankers down. A lot of F-bombs today. My goodness, it's been a long week. I just want to get on with it. Let's just get on with this thing. Shoot them down. Because our planet is not ready for the change, and we're not ready for those fourth dimensional energies, which would have been coming in over hundreds and hundreds of years. So we're only getting a little bit of a spillover in the DNA changes, but we're not getting anywhere near the type of consciousness shift that would have happened if it wasn't for these Draco trying to create their prison planet here. So the Draco have been authorized to let this happen because of so many forms of consent that we've given over thousands of years, where they've told us who they are, they've showed us their satanic symbols, and we don't stand up to them and we don't stop them. So once we take our power back, that's when we catapult into this new energy and we get our light body activation. So we don't exactly know when this is going to happen. In the Law of One, they talk about that it cannot exactly be predicted. But part of it might involve the moment that they shoot down these tankers. And then the consciousness on Earth changes, and as we change, our energy actually activates that sun to do its solar flash. It's all interconnected. This is all the stuff that I've learned in just the last, 6 months, actually. So, am I correct in assuming that the basic vibration that makes our physical world changes and makes a whole new type of being? And they say yes. So that is the light body activation. Am I to understand that the harvest will occur in the year 2011? Or will it be spread out? They say this is an approximation. We have stated we have difficulty with your time space. Now, this is shameless self-promotion, but hey, you're already here. In the end of the Ascension Mysteries, I show an amazing time loop that hit me in Canada last September, in which the beings guided me to go back and read May 2000 in my transcripts. And then it turns out that as I'm reading May 2000, there are very specific phrases that told me that they knew I was going to be in Banff in Canada. They gave the name of the president of Canada who actually created Banff. They give the name of the type of purple granite that the Banff Mountains are made out of, porphyry. And there was literally 25 other things. Like I'm having frickin' chia seed oatmeal, and then I go in and read, which I don't usually have except when I'm in Canada, and I go in and read it, and there's the chia seed oatmeal in the frickin' time loop. It's like somebody sitting there with a notebook, writing down the things that I'm doing, and then making me have dreams about it 16 years ago. Or in that case, it was 15 years. What happened to the slides? Whoa. Boom. Okay, it's back. So in this time loop, they totally acknowledge that they knew where I was in the time and the year that I was in. And then they say that it's only a couple of years away. The few years, they use the term a few. So I think because we are literally the cosmic equivalent of the blue bus, our ascension is not going very well. I got the blue thermos. And I had the distinct pleasure of inhaling that drink as well as swallowing it. We're the cosmic blue bus. So they had to give us an extension. How did they do that? Gigantic spheres that are as big as Neptune, Jupiter, and the moon in some cases. These gigantic spheres are here to hold back the big solar flash until the right moment that is perfect for everyone. That appears to, and that's what these beings told Corey. So I got to say, and it only really kind of dawns on me when I'm doing a live event like this, how freaking strange it is that I dedicated my life to studying this material and essentially trying to live my life like a priest, which I have not succeeded at all. That's one of the things I got dissed by the beings, and they said, if you want to be a priest, David, you need to start acting like it. Well, I've dropped the F-bomb at least 7 times in front of a live audience, so I got a ways to go. But you notice I'm not making dick jokes, so I've at least gotten that far. You got to run before you can fly. You got to rub it a little bit. No. Now we're going to do that. I was good. Oh, man. It's getting late. Okay. So they say it's an approximation. So this time loop basically says to me that it's about another few years, which I see that in 2015. Corey's people say it's definitely happening in 2018. What's 3 years plus 2015? 2018. So it looks like we have a little more time to prepare for this. The cabal is going to be taken down. We're going to see mass arrests. Consciousness is going to start changing from that. Yeah. And our consciousness change will also, as our consciousness changes and people go through this uncomfortable procedure of learning what the cabal really is, at some point they're going to have to shoot down these Draco tankers that are holding us under mind control, which I did not know about, but it totally makes sense that the Draco would make a technology like that. They don't want us to ascend, because as soon as they do, they lose the slaves. They don't want to lose the slaves, but they're going to have to. So it looks like 2018 could be it, but again, nobody really knows. It could be before then, it could be after then. Now check this out. This time period around 2011, again, it looks like we got to bump it ahead by 6-7 years, 2018, thereabouts, is an appropriate, probable, possible time-space nexus for harvest. Look at that. If you have a loved one who recently passed over, or someone that passed over a few years ago, those who are not incarnate in physical bodies will be included. It doesn't matter whether you're alive or whether you've passed into the afterlife. If you're ascension compatible, you will ascend when this happens. It affects the ghost planes as well as the physical planes. Everybody goes through this. Now, this is really weird. They say, in our culture, there is a saying that Jesus will return. Have you guys actually planned something like that to happen? They say, I will attempt to sort this out. It is difficult, to say the least. This entity Jesus became aware that it was not an entity in and of itself, but that it operated as a messenger of the one infinite creator whom the entity saw as love. Now, if you want the money shot, if you want the theme statement of preparing for ascension, that's it. What did I say the Tibetan ascension teachings, the rainbow body teachings teach you? You're not an entity. You're not an individual body. You are primordial awareness. You're empty awareness. Once you recognize that you are that awareness, you recognize also that you are still in an illusion. You're still in the illusion of having a body, in the illusion of being here on earth. That's where you want to become a messenger. So the messenger part is so key, because Jesus basically, in their terms, was intended to tell us what we need to do to ascend. So you want to help other people. You want to try to share this with them. But again, for God's sake, follow the rule of 10%. If you go up to somebody and go onto a narcissistic monologue and bombard them with 25 minutes of David Wilcock propaganda without ever taking a breath, they're not going to listen. Give people 10%, tell them one interesting thing that you know, and then just stop talking and let them respond. And then when they respond, they say, wow, that's interesting, because I've thought about ETs before, and we can't be alone in the universe, of course. There's got to be people out there. Yeah, right. And then you feed them another piece of information. They think of something else. There was a really cool time when I was in Canada, and I was up there at Moraine Lake, and I'm looking out over this gorgeous mountain view, and there were some hikers that came up, and they were very mainstream people. And I did this 10%, 10%, 10% thing, just gave them little bits. And they kept coming back, and within about 40 minutes, I had basically told them everything that I'm telling you in a shortened, distorted, it wasn't totally like all this, but a condensed, kind of souped-up form. Basically was able to tell them everything. You just got to do it a little at a time. So what did Jesus do? He spoke in parables. If you don't want to understand it, you're not going to understand it. It's all cloaked in metaphor. So Jesus was aware that the earth was in the last portion of its cycle, and he said that those of his level of consciousness would return at the harvest. Well, I don't know about you, but it certainly looks like these sphere beings are at that level of consciousness. They're expecting Corey and me to uphold spiritual teachings. They're telling me, if you want to be a priest, you need to act like it. Okay, so that means no more dick jokes and no more F-bombs. So I'm kind of like putting that to bed now, burying that part of myself benevolently, but apparently it didn't work, so I don't know. And so those of its consciousness would return. The particular mind-body-spirit complex you call Jesus is not going to return except as a member of the Confederation, occasionally speaking through the form of channeling. And they have to do it this way because it would create too much controversy. Everybody's going to disagree about who this guy is, right? If Jesus were to just embody, everybody's going to, all the fundamentalist Christian networks like the PTL Club, right, and the TBN, they've got a whole studio with the camera running and the lights already on, with the chair for Jesus to sit in when he has his second coming so they can put him on their Christian network, because of course they're right. You have 38,830 sects of Christianity, many of whom disagree with each other and think only their people are going to ascend. Do you think the beings could give us a manifestation of a Christ apparition? Say, guess what, everybody, I'm back. No, they're telling you very clearly in the Law of One that's not going to happen. However, there are others of identical congruency of consciousness that will welcome those to fourth density. This is the meaning of the returning. Well, guess what? If we're in an identical congruency of consciousness for fourth density, what did the people in the inner earth tell Corey they were? Fourth density. So those people in the inner earth are already at that Christ vibration, the positive ones. They're some of the people that have been giving us messages, talking to us about their civilizations. We did a whole thing on the inner earth that I was really blown away how much we got through in 2 hours. Now, when graduation occurs at the end of a cycle and entities move from one planet to another, by what means do they go to a new planet? And this gets really weird syntax. In the scheme of the Creator, the first step of the mind-body-spirit totality beingness, and that means the total mind of the whole earth, all the people as one, is to then place its mind-body-spirit complex distortion, meaning each individual person, in the proper location of love and light. So the planet makes the decision, and the inner earth people are what help. This is done to ensure proper healing of the complex, meaning the body, what we've gone through in multiple incarnations, and eventual attunement with the earth's total consciousness. This takes a very variable length of your time-space. After this is accomplished, the experience of the cycle is dissolved and filtered until only your purest vibrational form remains. At this time, the harvested mind-body-spirit totality beingness, meaning the Earth's whole consciousness, evaluates the needs of its beingness, the density needs, and chooses the most appropriate new environment for people to either repeat the cycle or move forward and ascend. This is the manner of the harvesting. It is guarded and watched over by many, including the sphere beings, the inner earth beings. All those people are doing this. They're all helping us out with this. It's very, very big stuff. When the entity moves from one planet to another, is he moved in thought or by a vehicle? The mind-body-spirit totality beingness is one with the Creator. There is no time or space, just like that original particle that those scientists have now proved is the whole universe. Therefore, it is a matter of thinking the proper locus in the infinite array of time spaces. That's interesting. So because there's no real space, right, it's all just this one photon, you can think anywhere you want to go, and you teleport there, and you're done. So there's no spaceship required. At this particular nexus, the probability vortexes indicate somewhere between 100 to 700 of your years as a transitional period. Now, this is one of the big debates that we've always had with the Law of One. And the people who follow this are called gradualists, because they say, oh, it's all gradual, nothing's going to happen. All the other things that I said to you about a 20-degree pole shift that is complete as this change occurs, roughly 30 years after 1981, I think this is actually talking about the amount of time that the Earth is disrupted before people could live on the surface without going into fourth density. That's what it appears to be. Just to clear that up. At some point in the future, the fourth density sphere will be fully activated. What is the difference between full activation and partial activation? At this time, the cosmic influxes are conducive to true color green particles being formed and material of this nature being formed, meaning a new reality made of new levels of matter, like that geometric phase shift I was telling you about. However, there is a mixture of yellow and green ray environments at this time, necessitating the birthing of transitional bodies. That's very interesting and very significant. We go through a transitional phase where we have transitional bodies. At full activation of the true color green density of love, the Earth will become solid and inhabitable upon its own, and the birthing that takes place will have been transformed through the process of time to the appropriate type of vehicle to appreciate in full the fourth density environment. So they're saying here that your bodies go through a gradual change to some degree. There's an evolutionary shift. So even once the flash happens, your body is going to continue evolving. It's not like you're already completely ascended as soon as it happens. That's interesting. You're going to grow into the ascension. So we go through the flash, and we get more activated as time goes on. I'm going to make a statement and have you correct me. As the spiraling action of our entire major galaxy and our planetary system spirals into its new position, fourth density vibrations become more and more pronounced. These atomic vibrations begin to create more and more completely a fourth density planet and fourth density bodies to live on that planet. Is this correct? They say this is partially correct. To be corrected is the concept of the creation of the new ascended green ray bodies. This creation will be gradual and will take place beginning with your third density type of body and through the means of sexual reproduction by evolution turn into fourth density bodies. That's very interesting. So we apparently will bring the third density body with us, and it will be activated as we go. And as we have children, those children are going to be increasingly more evolved. Just like I showed you, you zap the eggs and the organism changes. The influxes of true color green energy will more and more create the conditions in which the atomic structure of the cells of the body is that of love. It's pretty awesome. This transitional body will be able to appreciate fourth density vibrations as the in-streaming increases without the disruption of the 3D body. If a third density entity was electrically aware of 4D in full, the third density electrical fields would fail due to incompatibility. That means your body just vaporizes. So the 4D blast, if you didn't go through this transitional phase, you have to either ascend or you just get toasted, and that's why they have to take people away, because if you get hit with this thing and you're not ready for it, you just turn into hash browns, basically. This is wild stuff, huh? We're almost done. Such entities, to some extent, consciously are aware of fourth density understandings, which third density cannot remember because they have forgotten. Thus, the fourth density experience may be begun with the added attraction for an entity oriented towards service to others of dwelling in a troubled third density environment and offering love and compassion. So it appears that that's happening now, and that people with these psychic abilities and so forth, that we are being activated within our own bodies to help others, and we're going through a transitional phase. Our skulls are getting larger, our DNA is changing. That's all part of this gradual ascension which they're describing. But they do also say there is a flash. Our solar system spirals into this new position in the galaxy. The sun goes off. These geometric energy patterns that everything is made from transform matter in an entirely new way, and we get catapulted into this entirely new reality. Whew, a lot of stuff, huh? Wow. So now what are we going to do? I want to have a meditation. I think that's a good way to end this thing. So let's have everybody put both feet flat on the floor. Everybody's fleeing, huh? Wow. They can't handle it. The sheep are being separated from the goats. I'm just joking. All right.